So I want to call out the limited edition apparel. The link is in the description. As I've spoken about before, the limited edition apparel is apparel that I basically come up with. So some of the designs suck, some of them not so much. It's a weird thing. The ones that I think are going to do really well usually don't. The ones that I think aren't going to do really well do really well. Either way, they're all limited runs, so it changes, you know, every single month. But all limited edition items are tri-blend material with, you know, the cut that everybody wants now that's a little bit tighter on their arms so they can show off how big their fucking arms are. The limited edition items directly support the podcast. So head over, pick up your shirt today. Could be a hoodie, could be shorts. We got these ball hugger shorts right now, which I would never wear, but I was told they were super popular. But you know what? They were wrong because they're still sitting there and I probably should discount them right now. Anyhow, if you want to see the discount on the ball hugger shorts, head over to the limited edition apparel, link in the description box. You guys are selecting Merrick for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. There's a table talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are, thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk Merrick Health for all your hormone optimization and performance needs.
Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Bryce Krawczyk.
Yeah.
Actually, Krawczyk is better. Krawczyk is better,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We practiced beforehand, but I was closer on this one.
Even right off the bat.
because we were talking about how I screwed up Joey's after he's been on 5 times beforehand. Bryce's background is in the CPU and the IPF, a decade of experience as a lifter, still competitive lifter. We'll talk a little bit about your last meet, which was just a couple of weeks, like a month, 6 weeks maybe-ish.
Yeah, not long ago. Yeah.
And also coach. I don't want to say YouTuber. I don't want to say social media influencer because that's kind of part of how you grow your brand. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that, but more importantly, I want to talk about how you work with your clients, training philosophy, how you got in the sport. Is something I want to touch on because I didn't find that as I was going through the timeline, which is kind of a testament to your skills as a coach, by the way. And for those people that are listening, because when I go through and I don't like to use research, right? But when I go through to research people, I don't know what else to call it, study.
I mean, I think
stalk.
Fair term.
Like when I go through and stalk people, normally that's what I find. Then I don't want to talk a whole lot about it because you've told the story over and over and over. But I wasn't able to find that, or I didn't go through enough. But what I did find was a lot of Q&A stuff on training and so forth that we're definitely going to get into. Injury stuff that we're going to get into, restoration stuff that we're going to get into, how you work with your clients and things like that, which I'm more excited to kind of get into. But when did you, so let's not just look at powerlifting at this point, because your athletic background kind of helps determine what you're going to be able to do in the sport. So yes, there's a genetic component where nobody's going to deny that, but there's also a component that's developed or not when somebody's younger in what sports they participated in or just what they did play. Yeah. So going back, what sports were you involved in or activities to be able to build your GPP base before, but just sport base?
Right. Yeah. I think the first thing I actually kind of dedicated myself to was Taekwondo when I was like 10 or 11 or something like that. and did that for a number of years. Played some baseball, played soccer competitively for a couple of years. And then kind of around high school, really like fell out of love with athletics in a lot of ways.
Why?
I don't know. I think I just wasn't able to find the right thing that pulled me in. You know what I mean? I tried out for the football team. I got on the football team. I played one play in a preseason game as a receiver. I caught the ball. I got hit. I lost the ball. Never played again.
Okay.
Like coach was like, oh, I guess that guy's off.
Was that the same thing in sports before that though?
Not really. No, I always had a pretty decent level of aptitude. I was able to, I was probably above average, I would say, in a lot of the other things that I had kind of committed myself to. And then it wasn't until maybe a few years post high school that I'd been playing in a band and touring and living in a van a little bit and drinking and smoking, a lot of that kind of stuff, and had decided like, oh, I'm just going to like go to the gym. I had talked to a couple guys who had worked. I had worked as a bouncer at the university bar, and talked to a couple of the guys there, and was lucky enough to have a conversation with this guy, Alexis. And he was like, here's what you need to do. You need to have a day where you squat, a day where you bench, a day where you deadlift, and a day where you overhead press. He said, build your programming around that and go from there. So that was my very first program, was dedicating a day to each of those movements and then just throwing in whatever accessories I could. And very quickly was just like, I love this.
All right, jumping back to the football. So if you weren't playing, was your coach one of the guys that said, just go over there and just sit and don't do anything? Or was the coach, go practice your drills?
I was at every practice. I was running around, doing the laps and stuff like that. I think he tried maybe to find a position for me. I don't know if I had the background or the brain for football. Like, I don't know what it was that didn't really click with it. I remember the last game of the season, I think we had kind of, wrapped it all up, and he kept saying like, Krawczyk, get your helmet on, you're going in. And it just like, it never happened. He's like, you're going in next play. You're going in next play. You're going in next play. And then the season ended, and I was like, well, I'm not trying out for the football team next year.
So with the Taekwondo, then how many years did that go? And what did the practice schedules kind of look like? Or classes?
That was maybe 4 or 5 years. And I think twice a week. This was a long time ago. But I mean, it was to the point where I'd go to, competitions and go do like the katas and sparring and stuff like that. And, see how I stacked up against others. And I think that competitive practice and a little bit of that competitive drive was maybe something that kind of pulled me in, because I was able to compete and able to like practice it whenever I wanted. You know what I mean?
What I'm trying to figure out is when kids are going through development, you'll have, and I'll use soccer as an example, right? Because it's global. People understand that. And American football, but they get American football too, but it happens almost in every sport, where when they're in the junior high ages, 10, 12, a lot of coaches will start the kids that have matured sooner, because they're bigger, they're stronger. Then the other kids are told, just go over here. And then that over there is either just sitting down doing nothing or drills. Right. Or if it's Taekwondo, it may be, you're not physically as mature as the other ones. So just go over here and do these strikes or whatever is going to practice these drills. Well, what happens is over a period of time, those kids physically mature. And then beat the fuck out of the other kids because they never developed the skills. Because they were always just playing, scoring points and all the other kind of stuff. And then they quit. Right. The other thing that happens is the kids that end up just drilling can end up in sports such as powerlifting, which is where I'm going to, which is a very repetitive, boring type of thing. And a lot of your training that I can see, we'll discuss that over a period of time, revolves more around being closer to the competitive lifts with less variation, which I'm trying to figure out where that comes from. Right. Because if you're already preconditioned at a young age, like, hey, look, just doing the thing over and over and over again, and being a musician is kind of plays into that, right? Is that's where excellence comes, is the repetitiveness of that thing, to where if it's guitar is your thing, but then instead of doing that, you're doing all the other instruments as well. You just suck at all of them. Where if you just do the one over and over again, then that becomes kind of a little bit of your mental barometer on being able to do the grind stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm going to tend to believe that probably came more from the musician side.
I think it came from like when I do a thing, I just really want to have agency. Like I want to be in charge of progressing, and I want to see if I increase my efforts, do I get more back? You know, I like that one-to-one sort of, you know, measure, or the way that there's transference between, like, if I go to the gym and I work my ass off and I do all these things outside of the gym, you know, I see results. It happens. I'm in charge. And the biggest contrast for me was coming from, you know, trying to play in a band and make it somewhere, because you needed to know the right people. You needed to get on the right bills. You needed to be at the right times, at the right places, have the right conversations. And yes, you needed to like be good at your craft, and you needed to be a good band that people want to listen to. But there was so much of that just felt like it was so far out of my control that when I started lifting kind of immediately after that, I was like, this is my thing. This is my thing, because I'm in control. I make the rules. You know, if I push harder, I get more out of it. And that to me was just like that clicked in my brain and made perfect sense, and just began my whole kind of obsession with lifting.
Who would you have been in high school? Like, if you would explain who you were in high school, what is that?
I don't even know. Like I was kind of friends with everybody, really good friends with like a couple people. I like to play video games, and yeah, I don't know, just kind of coasted by, I think, a little bit in school. Like, didn't really get pulled in most instances. I think there were like some English classes, and writing became kind of thing, which led to me, you know, doing vocals and writing lyrics and stuff in bands later. But yeah, I just kind of wasn't really super invested. I was looking for distractions and looking for more stimulating things, I think, through a lot of school.
Well, it's interesting because you definitely covered all the prerequisites to be a great powerlifter. You lived in your car, your van.
Yeah.
You were a bouncer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we start checking the boxes, you know, they're all in there. So it doesn't matter if somebody is, you know, on the IPF side or on the, you know, full multiply side. It's this is terrible. Those boxes resurface.
Yeah.
Way too often.
There's a type. There's no doubt.
So how did that lead in? Oh my God, I gotta let my brain laugh here for a minute, because it happens. It's too frequent. I'm just wondering how many people right now are like, man, fuck my life. I need to go live in my car. So how did that lead into your first meet, which I think was 2012, right?
So it actually, I kind of got obsessed with lifting and started enjoying it. And then the first step for me was wanting to pursue a career in it. Because again, with jobs, with careers, nothing had grabbed me or stimulated me enough to stay interested or really pursue things. I had gone to university for film. I went to university for anthropology. I tried out all these other things and wasn't engaged with it.
How old were you at the time?
20. Okay. 20 to 23, I would say.
So through university?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I did a year or two of film, dropped out, I think worked for a year or two, moved to Vancouver, did a year or two of anthropology, dropped out, was a bartender, played in bands, etc. But I forget where I was going with that, but
your first meet. So
yeah. Okay. So the thing for me was I wanted a career. I wanted a job that allowed me to do the stuff that I found engaging. And that was for me, like, you know, fitness related. So initially I had gotten into kind of helping this guy out in my hometown. We had worked at Pizza Hut together, like way back in the day. And he went on to have this very successful personal training business. He had done a bunch of bodybuilding shows and subsequently some powerlifting meets in the off season, things like that. And I reached out to him and he was like, well, come work for me. And, you know, you can take over some of my clients and then you can, you know, work on your certifications and get your education and stuff like that. And I'll kind of help mentor you and that kind of thing. So personal
training clients or strength clients?
Personal training clients. Okay. Yeah. My first ever exposure to that was a group of like 12, like 25 to 45-year-old women. And I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was like leading this fitness class, just like scrawny, weird looking dude, bunch of tattoos, long hair, like big holes in my ears.
Now, when you say fitness class, what are you talking about here?
It was like everybody had a little circuit station, and on the clock we'd switch and that kind of thing.
All right. So it wasn't like an aerobics class.
Not quite. No, it was all very strength based. Like it was lunges and presses and stuff like that. But the guy who kind of brought me in there, his name's Neil. He also was a powerlifter and kind of was like, here's this powerlifting thing. And I had thought, I was getting to the point at the time where I was like, I love going to the gym. I love training. I love what this does and feels like. And I'm fully sold on it. And I wanted to find a reason to do it. Like I wanted to find something more in it that would draw me and keep me going with it and keep me, for lack of a better word, motivated. And bodybuilding, I was like, no, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. Like it doesn't appeal. And he, had done these powerlifting meets a couple times and said, well, do you want to come do one with me? So I picked up a copy of 531 for powerlifters. I think the variation where there's like a single in it every other week or something.
Yeah.
And ran that into my first powerlifting competition. And like, that was it, man. I hit my first squat in a meet and I was...
Tell me about it. What do you mean that was it?
Like I got off the platform and was like, this is the best feeling I've ever felt in my life. And I just I knew that was it.
After all three lifts or after
the first squat?
Yeah.
Like the lights went up. Everybody that I was like competing against was all cheering for me. And I was just like, that's it. Like, that's all I need is that thing.
What would you say that thing was?
I don't know. It was like the
internal, external
for sure. Like it was the actualization and the being able to kind of like put all of the time and effort and meaning and sacrifice and thought and just like all of this obsessive kind of energy that I had at the time in this thing that was lifting. It was like I got to put that into like one little moment and it meant just so much to me, right? Like it was all of those things encapsulated in this one little minute. And it's super objective. Like it's a number, you get it or you don't. And like, that's what you get out of all that work. And for me, just turning that into this number, this objective thing was just I don't know. I struggle to describe it even still, but I just remember having this like wave come over me after that first squat and being like, I'm in.
How did your benches go then?
So I learned in the warm-up room all the rules of the competition.
Yeah.
So I had been training with a false grip and toe picking and my head coming up off the bench. And in the warm-up room, somebody was like, you can't do any of that out there, man. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. So I had to learn to wrap my thumbs around and keep my head down. And I think I got 1 out of 3 benches because my head came up on one. I think I took a dumb jump on one, but
I didn't know about the thumb thing. I should have known that. I know the head for sure, but the thumb thing, I didn't know.
The thumb thing as
well. That's still a rule.
Yeah. Yeah. But
so you fixed all that, I assume, but did you hit the numbers you wanted to hit?
No, bench wasn't great. And like, it wasn't for a number of years, I think, after that. But again, it's like, it's the shit sandwich, right? So I got the squat and I got the deadlift. Yeah. And I think, again, my third deadlift,
you didn't know that at the time.
No, I didn't really know what was going on at all. But I got to the deadlift and I remember there's this photo or even video of my third deadlift for my first competition. And this guy, Ryan Stinn, who's gone on to be like a good friend of mine and very, very involved in Canadian powerlifting, is kind of like spotting and loading. So he's sitting just off to the side. The camera gets a really good angle of him. And you see me lock out my deadlift and he just goes like bursts out laughing. And then I think he yelled at me. He said, put some weight on the bar. And at the time I was like, I don't know, is this guy insulting me? Like, is he just saying that my deadlift was light and like I suck or what? But obviously he meant that was like way too easy to be a third deadlift. But again, it was one of those things, I pulled more than I ever had before, and like the lights go up and the crowd cheers and everybody's stoked, and it just is like, so I had that huge opening of the day emotionally, and then the ending of the day with the deadlifts, and that sealed the deal for me. So
your first meet was in 2012 and you founded Calgary Barbell, correct? In 2014. So this makes sense now because I know what your purpose was going in.
Yeah.
You know, it was to have, you know, a business, to make a living out of doing something that you loved.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was one of the questions I wanted to try to figure out is how was that so close? Because normally that's not the case. You'll have somebody that's powerlifted for a while and then they, for whatever reason, try to make a business out of all that.
Yeah.
Where after that first meet, you were working with Gen Pop going into that.
Yeah.
I assume there was a transition period of time.
Yeah.
After that first meet, did you start to target lifters a little bit more?
Yes, to a point. But also, so right after that, I moved to Calgary, where I am now, to start full-time university education in the vein of like as a personal fitness trainer diploma program. So it's 2 years, all your A&P, strength training theory, all that kind of stuff, really kind of nicely encapsulated, you know, built for somebody who wants to be a trainer and working with people. And I think, you know, there's a big difference between like a kinesiology degree if you want to be more on the side of theoretical and you know, in academia and stuff. But this was perfect for what I needed. So I moved to Calgary, and one of our first couple weeks, we had some guy from a Globo gym, like a box gym, come in and say, basically like, you know, you're going to be trainers. We need trainers. Come work for us. And I was like, well, I need a job. So I went and applied and got a job at the, you know, Box Globo gym. So I was still very much working with general population people for a lot of my, you know, early work in the field, but I was doing it from the perspective of everyone should powerlift. Like if I can get these people to be able to squat, bench, deadlift, then, you know, I'm going to be able to give them the most bang for their buck in terms of what they're getting out of their training. I'm going to hopefully be able to get them, you know, more invested and moving better and, you know, all these kinds of things. Because for me, that was still very much the core of my training philosophy. Now, you know, whether or not their goal was weight loss, weight gain, whatever, that was always somewhere I was trying to get people to. And by way of doing that, ended up with, you know, I think the first powerlifting meet I coached, like game day coached at, I had 12 lifters across like 3 platforms in one session, and it was just absolute chaos. And everybody was like first time lifters because I had kind of built this community out of this box gym, and it was just trial by fire. Yeah, exactly.
With the education part, was the syllabus, I suppose that's what you would call that, the class load, was it targeted for that, or did you have to do a lot of interdisciplinary or study for that?
So it was
like
a bit of both. I think that the program was really well built to basically give someone the tools to create a job in the fitness industry, working with people, working with clients, whether it was a team and whether it was for, you know, aqua size or whatever, because we had a class that was like fitness modalities, and I remember going to the pool and, you know, strapping on like 3 or 4 weight belts or whatever, flotation belts, like trying to get myself to float. But you know, we went through all kinds of Tabata and HIIT and all different kinds of stuff. So it wasn't necessarily, you know, super targeted. It was a very kind of like broad. We had a business class at the end of it, and ironically, that was where I kind of came up with the idea for Calgary Barbell. And the first time I ever did any kind of branding, I had written this program for one of my teachers and handed it in. And it was supposed to be this strength training program. I handed it in, and she took one look at it and handed it back to me and said, "There's no branding on there." And I was like, "You didn't even look at the program. Like, this is the best designed, most optimal, like greatest program ever. People are going to get huge and strong. Like, you don't understand." I was so mad. So I was like, whatever. I went home and like slapped this like gorilla head thing on there that I had like taken out of some other thing on Google image search, wrote Calgary Barbell, and like gave it back. But that was, you know, the first time I ever was like, actually.
Well, you had the product, you just didn't have the branding.
Yeah. So you know, through that and then another subsequent business class in that program, I came up with a business plan for not necessarily what Calgary Barbell turned into, but something similar. Like it got the wheels turning in terms of trying to create this thing that I could, you know, provide myself and others a living within powerlifting and do all the things that I love and, you know, be able to like make that into
Well, that's interesting. And it's also really good to hear, because when I went through, it was all the tracks are like, if it was sport management, it was always like health club oriented. You're going to manage this health club, or corporate fitness center oriented, or kind of in a way strength and conditioning oriented, kind of, where I had to basically hodgepodge together my own type of thing, because there was no entrepreneur side, to that, or just basic business. I mean, there was basic business fundamentals, but they were all more corporate structured, where it sounds like they had an angle that was actually showing the industry more what it was when you were going through. And in fairness to the people that were teaching me, that probably was the same too, because we're going way back to 90s or whatever. So there was, these were not, there were celebrity trainers, but that was about it.
Okay.
But it's good to hear these things, because we all kind of will tag our education background, just kind of like assume that's kind of what they still do.
Right.
Where it's not the case, because you still learn way more outside of school than you learn in school. But if those basic fundamentals are covered, anatomy, physiology, and different types of training modalities is awesome to hear. I didn't even have that. It's like, what the hell, then you get out. Let me say, I did, but it was like aerobic classes or group fitness.
I mean, the modalities of the day that were kind of more broadly accepted were probably very different then too, right? Like,
oh yeah. And I had a programming class where it's kind of the same thing. I put this program out, and it was basic linear programming, which I lived on for years. And it was just saying like, this won't work. And I'm like, what do you mean this won't work? This is how everybody trains, everybody. This won't work, because I think there was a debate that ended up being in class, because there wasn't enough cardiovascular fitness in there. I'm like, so you need to run like 10 miles a week? It was fucked up. But fortunately, I had a bodybuilder in the class with me. That was like, it was an interesting conversation of the day. But at the same point, I'm like, I can't fail. I've already invested so much time into other degrees. Kind of what you did. You have these other degrees, and then you figure out what you want to do. Then it's targeted. Then at that point, you're like, okay, I'm not gonna. For me, I wasn't the greatest student. Like, I can't fuck these up. These matter. And I was a way better student. Exactly.
That's the thing, right? And I didn't finish my degrees in those other studies. You know what I mean? Like this was something where a lot of the times I'd come to class and be like, I know this stuff already. Like, just from reading, honestly, like elite FTS articles, and consuming every little piece of powerlifting stuff I could get my hands on. I'm like, well, I know all the quads already. You know what I mean? Like, I know that you have biceps femoris and that's your hamstring. Like, just some of that stuff I had kind of already absorbed from just already being so excited and like I keep saying, obsessed with it. So I think that made it easier. But yeah, like you said, I was a much better student for it because I was engaged with it.
I'm convinced that the way a lifter comes into the sport is typically over 90% of the time the trajectory they stay. So in Canada, you didn't have that many choices. There's like the IPF, right? And then what was the untested? What was it?
CPL?
Yeah, I don't think it might have been called something else back then.
GPC.
Whatever. Yeah, is that? Yeah, GPC. Was that would be the WPC affiliate, right?
I'm not sure.
I believe. I don't want to speak out of tune, but I think so. But that track isn't where you were introduced, right? Nope. So you're introduced straight to IPF, which turned into whatever it is now, but but the reason I bring this up is because the sport does have drama, which we'll talk about later, which doesn't necessarily need to be there, but I think people forget that they forget how they came in. Like if somebody came in through like an APF side or a WPC side, then they're blinded to everything that goes on outside of that side.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And vice versa. If they come in the IPF side, they're kind of blinded. And it's better now, which some people will not like me saying that. It's better now because you see other sides. Where before you're just, you're like typecasted. I don't want to say stereo, you're typecasted into that, but those are your roots. Those are your background. And that's where your long-term goals start to become established because you're in that, you have that first meet. Right. Then you want to win the next stage up would be what, I can't say the word,
provincials,
right? Yeah. And then after that, nationals, and after, so there's the path, right? Yeah. Which is a very distinct set path, you know, wherein when I came up, it was the US, I don't want to go back that far. It's just the APF, because it was the US just one time, the USPF. Yeah. It was that. So here was that path. There's that. Then you qualify for nationals. The state didn't really matter. You qualify for nationals, then nationals, world. That was the path. Right. And having that distinct path, I think when somebody comes in, is super important. Yeah. Because they don't end up bouncing around, you know, it's laser focused, I guess, is what you have better focus on where to go. And if you're making progress, were you around lifters that were, obviously when you started, yes, but were you around lifters that were higher through that path?
Yeah, I remember seeing, so Connor Lutz, a guy who now lives in Calgary, that I'm fortunate enough to train with sometimes. I remember seeing him at a meet, and he was spotting and loading, and I knew I had seen his name on a bunch of the provincial records, because that was kind of as far as I had like looked into that process, was, you know, what are the records in my weight class? And I was 83 kilos at the time, so I was competing at 181. I'm just under 6 feet tall, and I see Connor, and he's 5'6". And just like jacked. Yeah. And that was, you know, so I'd seen his name on all the records in my weight class. I saw him and was like, oh man, I need to go up. Like I need to gain weight kind of thing. Yeah. But that was one of the first times I had kind of, you know, seen and interacted. And obviously I didn't know her as well at the time, but Rhea Stin, who's another lifter who was at that first meet, you know, had won, I think, junior world championships and was making like huge inroads in the sport really early in her career. And she was around, it was her gym that hosted that. My first competition, it was in the basement of a mall kind of.
And when you started, it was raw, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So
for me anyways.
Yeah. So if my notes are right, it's like 2 years raw, then it went into the single ply.
So I think I got into single ply maybe 2017, 2018-ish.
So about 5 years. Yeah. 5 years in raw.
Yeah.
And was it that time, because there's been a flip, and I have a hard time you can go through open powerlifting to see so much, but in the IPF, single ply was dominant, obviously, because raw didn't exist. So there's just a single ply. And then that switch came to where raw surpassed. Was that about that 2015 time, or was it sooner than that?
It was right around the time that I was getting into the sport that raw lifting was really, I think, taking off. If I'm not mistaken, the first IPF like classic or raw world championship was in like 2011, 2012.
I think so, because they were the last to embrace it, the IPF.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was kind of the sort of inception of all that. And I think, you know, part of what got me so excited was that I was part of this like wave of growth in the sport. You know, going to my first meet and seeing there must have been like maybe 20 competitors or something, and like 2 women. And then, you know, fast forward 2 years and it's like 60% female competitors, and meets are packed with like hundreds of people.
Now with that first meet, what percentage of them were single ply compared to raw?
It might've been like 50-50 even. Okay. Like there were a lot more single ply lifters around in that, you know, sort of.
So were you part of the group that was catching shit for being raw?
No, there wasn't really as much of that back then. I think, and maybe it was, you know, I say back then, but maybe it was just that group.
Well, it could have already been past that too.
For sure.
The first, let me step back. Raw existed before gear. I mean, raw existed before gear even came around. So, but there were no records or anything really for that. Right. And then and this is kind of fucked up, even with the single ply, no matter what route you're going through, there were a lot of benches that were done during the all gear time where people didn't wear the shirt because it was just too much of a pain in the ass. Yeah. They're not counted as raw, but who would know how to count that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't
word of mouth. I mean, if you say, "Hey, we'll just trust you." Hey,
I didn't wear a shirt last weekend. I might have looked like it. But, no.
But the first wave, or let's say the second wave, right? Because if it started raw, it'd have to be the second wave. Those guys were getting all kinds of shit, you know, because this is the one thing that I think so cool about powerlifting, because there's a lot of good things about it. People don't talk about as much as they should, right? Is it was not in the best interest of in any country it wasn't in the best interest of any meet director. It wasn't in the best interest of any federation. It wasn't in the best interest of any of the companies that support the sports for Raw to happen. You think about that for a minute. It wasn't, right? So the gear companies make money selling gear. They don't make money with knee sleeves. You know, there's a big difference between what you had to buy for a single ply meet, especially single ply,
sure. Yeah,
because you had your training shit and then your meet stuff, then your meet stuff became the training stuff.
Yep.
So you're going through 3 squat suits a year, you know, where multiply, I guess, was a little better because one suit would last you 10 years.
Okay.
Which is my theory, which is why a lot of the gear companies didn't give a shit about trying to push the multiply as hard from a marketing side because they make less money. Think about it. They make way less money. Yeah. You know, the suits, even when you started the suits back then, you might have got one good meet out of it and you used it for your training. So you got one good meet out of it and then became your trainings. So it does rotate through. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like when I first got into Equipped in like 2017, I mean, I think I don't know, I might be just like a weird example of an equipped lifter, but you know, I was always very staunchly on the side of like, I would rather get a little bit less out of my equipment so that I could move the way I wanted to move. And that to me was way more important. So, you know, I'd get these suits and the straps would be like 3 inches off my shoulders and I'd be able to hit depth with like 95% of my raw squat on day one in a new suit. But you know, I'd ride that thing till the wheels fell off. And eventually, you know, I learned to sew. So I'd make little modifications, you know, bring in the hips, bring in the straps and stuff, and just kind of tighten it up as it loosened up. And then once it got to the point where it was not moving anymore and I couldn't realistically take it in anymore, then it started to feel like, okay, the fabric's starting to give, you know what I mean? So
that reminded me of that stupid rule to where you couldn't take the strap. Like you had to like make tags. You had to like sew it because you couldn't take the material out of it. Yeah. That was one of those things where I'm like, what the fuck? Like, why are they doing that? So it's easier to pull up on it. Like I couldn't figure it out. Yeah. And then somebody explained, no, you can't, whatever it was, you can't take the material.
Yeah. Very specific,
which was crazy
to modify.
But my point was, I can't think of any other sport that I know of, that I know enough about to where the lifters actually dictated something that wasn't in the best interest of the corporations that support it or the federations that run it.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, lifters, when they bitch and complain and like they do now, they need to step back and think about that a little bit because they have way more control than they think. And Raw is the testament of that.
Yeah.
Because of how that whole thing happened. But those first batch of people, because this is also when forums were more of a thing online than Instagram. I don't even think any of those existed at that time. So if you were to get, I don't want to say bullied, but if you were to get trolled's a better word.
Yeah.
It was trolling hard.
Yeah.
You know, because there's only a few places that you could go, only one thread, and just boom, and those guys were getting waxed. Then it flipped in whatever time period that was.
Yeah.
I guess I haven't given a fuck enough to really go look and see when it was. But when that happened, then boom, you know, it just blew up.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's why you got into the single ply. So why did you move? I'm getting ahead of myself. What status did you achieve in the sport before jumping to single ply?
So between 2012 and 2016, I remember I won my first provincials in like 2014 maybe. Won 1 or 2 nationals, went to Worlds, placed second at Worlds in 2016, and broke my first world record deadlift in 2015. And then in 2017, after a couple of years of dealing with a hip injury that was pretty shitty, I was at a coaching summit with Mike T and Bryce Lewis and a couple other coaches from Alberta. And this guy, Shane, who went on to be one of the best benchers in Canada and president of CPU for a little bit, did this like little PowerPoint presentation and was like, this is equipped lifting. You know, this is what a bench shirt is and does, and this is a squat suit. And I think he had his wife come in and like demonstrated wrapping knees or something like that. And I was like, you know what? Like I've seen people doing that. That seems pretty cool. I might want to try that out. So I kind of talked, you know, I picked Shane's brain a little bit and found some stuff around town, like a used bench shirt from this guy and, some knee wraps from that guy, and kind of piecemealed together some stuff and ordered a suit and tried it out. And then, it felt awesome and my hip didn't hurt. Like I could squat heavy and it didn't hurt, which was something I had been dealing with for long enough at that point that I was like, well, I'm just going to push this because I can go light in my raw stuff and this still feels good. And then I got really hooked on the equipped stuff and pushed that.
I'm more interested now in what was that event? So it sounds like an event where like coaches came together to mentor each other, to learn from each other.
More or less. Yeah. It was open to the public. There was myself and maybe 3 or 4 other like coaches and nutrition experts from around like our province. And then we brought out, or the organizers, I should say, brought out Mike T and Bryce Lewis, to bring in more talent and more coaches, more brains. And then, each of us had a presentation and, listened to the other coach's presentation and, went for dinner, and that was
How were you training up until that point?
So I'm pretty sure by that point I had been coached by Mike T already for a couple of years. So, I mean, yeah, everything was raw. I don't think I had even really messed with knee wraps or anything like that.
So was he more of the high? Where was his frequency at that time? Because he's gone through different iterations.
So at that point, I was doing a lot of work. I remember training for 2016 Worlds, and it was in one of Mike's Project Momentum phases.
Oh shit!
So I was doing SBD 4 days a week. I would have like a baseline volume dose. And 1 day per lift, I would have like a single and a top set. And then I would also have days where I would do, my SBDs, but then I'd also do, pause squat, long pause bench, stiff leg deadlifts, like throw in the accessories on top of it all. So at that point, I think I was breaking it up into like 2 days and just like having a nap in the office at the gym between clients. And like that was some of the most intense training I think I've ever done.
How long, with that phase specifically, how many blocks was that?
So I think I only ran that iteration of Project Momentum for, it would have been from like nationals to worlds, which would have been like a March to June timeline. So what, like 3-4 months?
So 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And would you say that was close to double the total volume that you were doing
as compared to
before?
No, probably not. No, because I mean, prior to that, I would do, I'd go in and I'd do ramping 5s up to a set at 8, and then like 3 back offs. And I was still very much training with high volume. It was more reorganizing the volume. So I had squat, bench, and deadlift exposures each time I trained.
So more frequency.
Yeah, frequency.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is I've seen people go through, and I don't want to say extreme because if you're conditioned for it, it's only extreme if you're not conditioned for it, right? But I've seen people go through more extreme type of training what they're conditioned for in a couple blocks like that and make ridiculous progress.
Yeah.
It's not repeatable, which I don't think people understand. Did you have that type of progress when you went through those?
I think I had some pretty good progress. My hip was already an issue, so my squat I don't think progressed that much. I think I squatted 310 at Worlds and 315 at Nationals. So, luckily I was only down 2.5 or 5 kilos, which honestly was probably about the best I could do with how my hip was. My bench, I don't think we had quite figured my bench out yet. So maybe I hit a 5 kilo PR or something, but my deadlift I think was 15 kilo PR in that time frame.
Interesting.
I had also switched from conventional to sumo in that time frame.
Okay.
So part of my learning sumo was I'm doing this thing 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And I remember like my knees and my adductors were so bad. I was like lying on the turf between sets, just like rolling around because it didn't hurt when I was lifting, but I'd set the bar down and everything would just go and tighten up. And I was like, oh, so the last couple of weeks of that prep, I remember I like pulled the deadlift volume way back and was able to recover better. Surprise, surprise.
So after that meet, training for that next week, did the frequency become more normalized? And then what was the result of when it came back down and become more normalized?
It came back down, became more normalized. And I think honestly, after that phase, pretty much everything started feeling a lot better. Like I think there was probably some sort of, post potentiation.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Like phasic thing, carry over between doing that brief period of really, really overloading the frequency and, getting back to more normalized training and being able to be, recovering between sessions where things, like I think I pulled 352 or 357 at Worlds. And I think the next competition I was like bumping up against the 800 mark, like 363, 365-ish.
I don't know if I would suggest this for others, right? Because, but I've heard,
this is not medical advice.
I know, but I've heard this, I've heard this a lot of times that somebody will, bump from normality, right, to 40% more, whatever it is, either frequency, volume, workload, whatever. Yeah. And normally it doesn't go so well. Right. Or it goes really, really, I mean, obviously three things can happen. It goes really well, it doesn't do shit, or it goes really, really bad. But normally it doesn't go so well, or it's a little bit good. In rare cases, it goes through the roof, which is almost a bad thing, because then the client lifter wants to repeat it, and then it goes really bad. But that's why I ask about the meet after, because I don't know if it's desensitized. I don't know what it's doing, but that next one usually just goes up through. So then, as somebody that's around this shit, you think, I wonder if I can have somebody long enough that if I just fuck their world,
but just for a bit,
for 3 months, and then they don't get so discouraged or so injured that it's almost like a bodybuilder when they diet, for a show, then they get that rebound after the show. Just goes through the roof, but I'm not confident enough to be able to say this would be a good idea. Yeah. It's maybe an interesting experiment. Yeah. Well, you have enough clients. So let's throw this out there. So if somebody was to do that, because you've worked with clients from Gen Pop to world record breakers. So where do you think their training agent experience should be if they were to play around with something like this? And I will also say that they should have somebody overseeing it as well. I would say like at least a couple of years, right? Like you probably want to be pretty proficient at the movements. You probably want your patterns to be pretty ironed in. You don't want to be going in and, drastically increasing your volume or anything really if you don't have at least consistent movements. And I'm not going to say like a good technique, because I think that's a whole kind of gray area when it comes to the individuality of how lifters move, but you want to be executing the same every time so you can at least have a consistent stress. Yeah. Right. So that you can control as many of the variables as possible. Because if you go in there and your squats are out here one day and in here one day, then it's just, you're really just closing your eyes and throwing darts at that point. So did anything with your training change after that meeting group, or whatever you want to call that? Because you bring all these guys together, and there's definitely something different about communication in person compared to, online and stuff like that, because ideas get thrown around. So were there any things that you took from that time that you applied to your training after that? I think I'd say so. I followed a lot of the people that were there really closely already. So I think a lot of the stuff was kind of reaffirming what I had tried to absorb from them already. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing for me was I took a lot away in terms of presenting and in giving a good presentation. All right. So okay. Good point. Giving an engaging discussion and, how much to rely on your slides and that kind of stuff. And I think there was way more there where I came away and I was embarrassed. I was like, I shit the bed. That was terrible. I can't believe I did that in front of Bryce Lewis and Mike T. That was so bad. How so? I felt like I didn't prepare enough, and I didn't have an interesting enough topic. And I think I talked about injuries, but then I got off track talking about other stuff mid presentation, mid slide. And looking back, if I could watch the presentation back, it was probably not that bad at all. I talked to Bryce and Mike after, and I was like, can you give me some any notes you have, any thoughts you have on how that went? Please, I'm more than happy to hear it. And they were both like, yeah, no, I thought it was really good, kind of thing. Maybe give me some notes, but neither of them were
yeah, no, you got to put some work in, kind of thing, like neither of them were concerned for me. So I don't think it was maybe as bad as I had in my head, but I was shook after that. So going away from that, I've put a lot more effort into like being able to present information well and practicing that and really trying to like hone that as a skill.
Let's stay on that topic then and go back to how many seminars were you doing before that?
Oh, like I had maybe done like one or two.
Okay.
Like I think I had gone to Winnipeg and did a seminar there, and it actually that went really well. And that was one of those times where I was like, man, I think I love this part of the sport as well. Getting a bunch of people together. The thing with that is way more practical. You know what I mean? Like I grabbed a whiteboard, wrote squat and a bunch of cues I wanted to talk about. Did the same thing for each lift. And we basically like do a quick theoretical thing. Like, here's the big issues I see. Here's cues I like to give. Now let's go get under the bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I got to walk around and just pick apart people's techniques and be like, okay, try this, now try this. And I just like, oh, I love that shit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, going into this, I thought like, I'm good at this, you know what I mean? But when it came to being a little bit more technical and maybe trying to present some research and, trying to be more, have a more clear through line of the information that I wanted to get out there, knowing that these people's level of background experience and knowledge is much higher than probably, average just lifters who aren't maybe as invested as coaches or whatever. It just like it changed things drastically, trying to present to a very different audience that I wasn't used to.
Were you on YouTube at that time?
Maybe like a little bit. I think at that point we were doing some like vlog style content. So it was mostly just, Dylan would come in, we'd film some lifting, and, if we were lucky, I'd have like a point to make at the end, other than just like talking about my training.
Okay. So it's in 2014, you start Calgary Barbell, which I'm assuming at that time was, training the clients that you had. Yeah. Was there an online perspective as well at that time?
I was hesitant to get into online training. I was like, can you really do that much with it? Like, can it be good? I just like, I wasn't sure that I bought into it, because I was like, I know what I can do with a person in person. I know I can like poke them in the back and like try to move their shoulder blades around or like really quickly demo something for them. But with the online stuff, I was like, I just don't know if I can do like an effective enough communication. So I had one guy who was my first online client. We tried some stuff and it was, kind of successful, kind of not. And I think he, had some life stuff come up, kind of got out of powerlifting for a bit, ended up coming back and in and out of powerlifting, and is now like I think he's doing some real cool stuff in Single Ply back in Saskatchewan. But I wasn't super big into the online stuff right away. I remember the first videos that we ever filmed, I was like, I want to do like client spotlights. Yeah. I want to film some videos and just like do a cool interview with my client, talk about the progress they've made, and like, this is marketing for the business kind of thing. And around that time, Dylan was like filming himself and doing some vlogs and getting really good at framing shots and doing cool edits and that kind of stuff. And we were kind of, we were around the same gyms and around the same people around the same time. And I was having him do these client spotlight things, and I had seen a couple of his vlogs, and we had this conversation. He's like, what if we did some vlogs of your lifting? He's like, I know I can film stuff and make it look cool. His at the time, he's like, nobody gives a shit about my training though. Like, I'm not training for anything. I just kind of train for myself. He's like, but you're training for worlds right now. Like, what if we kind of like combined these two things? And that was kind of, that was how our, social media, our YouTube video, making kind of was really born, was with a little vlog series leading into Worlds in 2016.
So was that the time period where you went into Single Ply?
That was maybe 2 years before I got into Single Ply.
Okay. So I didn't go back to your first video. Some of the other ones I saw so you showed the transition going back into the Single Ply. Oh, this would be interesting when we get to that. Okay. Anyhow, so this starts with you. How was that? Couple things. How was that perceived when it first came out, and how distracting or not was it to your own training?
So initially, I think it was kind of really well received. And I think one of the first things I noticed was we had filmed 3 or 4, and Dylan always had notes. He's like, you got to be more enthusiastic. He's like, you got to like enunciate, like use your speaking voice. You know what I mean? Because I was like,
don't be you.
So today we hit some squats, and they went pretty good. And like, he's like, try to get into it a little bit. And then the one day I came in and I had this, like, I wanted to talk about being appreciative as a lifter to the people around you, because I'd seen this kind of like trend in, being like, fuck your family, fuck your mom, like you gotta like put all those distractions away. And I was like, yo, if you do that, you've got nothing left. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to like kind of go in and like make this point about how, like, as lifters, we can't do this without our support system and this kind of stuff. And the first video I did like that, where I kind of like made a point and opened it up to be about more than just my training, we got a really good response on. People really enjoyed that. And then we kind of kept going with that. And I tried to come up with things to try to, add into these vlogs to make them about more than just follow my training. Yeah. And that was when things started to like pick up a little bit of steam. We got a couple other YouTubers that were doing some vlogs, like shout us out or mention us or, want to work together and that kind of stuff. So that was where it started snowballing a little bit.
When did it start to pivot into educational content?
I think it was just a natural extension of that, like realizing that's what people wanted, but also that, the stuff that I loved to do in terms of, taking somebody who couldn't sit down to a box in a squat style and getting them from that to being like competing in a meet. You know what I mean? Like that was the most fulfilling thing for me, was like, this person can now move and train and like do all these things that if I took that and put it into this other format, that not only could we like reach a lot of people, but we could, give a lot of this information out there. And the whole impetus for creating, Calgary Barbell and the videos and the education was, when I was coming up, that was what I wanted more of. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That was what I couldn't get enough of. I read a lot of articles and, I feel like there were 2 options. There was like Elite FTS and Louis stuff, which I loved and read a lot of, or there was like a weird Shaco forum where guys talked about like eating gummy bears and wrote out their volume sets. Mm-hmm. And it was just like, I want more, like I want more videos. I want more people talking about their philosophy. I want more like training footage and like motivation stuff. And so it became this goal to try to like make all the stuff that I wish I had when I was like in that phase of just being obsessed and like couldn't get enough of it.
At that time, it was YouTube, at least from our perspective, it was a place where people who had training logs on our site would just film their lift and then put it with the text. It was a free way to host videos. Yep. Right. So it was just embed code. That's all it was. Yep. And so I think a lot of people kind of missed the bubble, with that, because hell, even people that were still posting on some of the forums, that's all they were doing was posting their top set, kind of like an Instagram now, like posting their top set. But then the text would have to be someplace else. Right. And I remember my mindset back then. I'm like, no, don't write the fucking text on YouTube. The whole goal is to get them to come to the site, right? Like, not to take them away from the site. That's ridiculous. Right. Yeah. And but it left a gap, that I think you were able to come in and fill a little bit of that gap. Like, now here's somebody that it's more than just the top, because you can still find the older lifters. Go look at their YouTube.
You can find stuff from me. Sure. Because before Dylan, that's what I thought it was for too. It was like, I can upload my meet footage there so I can look at it in 10 years.
Yes.
Like
training footage.
I wasn't making anything for anybody else. I was like, I have a YouTube account, I think. Like, I don't know. I put videos on there sometimes.
I think we have like 600 or 700 videos maybe of just like an exercise of 5 reps. Yeah. And it just went on the site as like exercise index, tricep push downs. And there's some dude doing like 5 reps push downs, not even wanting to do it. Right. It's just like, here's this, here's that. Boom. It's like, whatever. Yeah. This is stupid. And then put it out there. And so that starts building that momentum, because you became more authentic. Right. So you put yourself out, which we kind of all know this, right? Yeah. From marketing, you put that out there, then it becomes authentic. And then it begins to grow from there. The second part of the question is, how did it change your training though? Right? Because now there's a different dynamic that's introduced, unless you're like Mike T, who was filming every lift from 3 different angles to begin with.
Right.
Were you already filming everything to begin with?
Not really, no. And maybe that just speaks to like Dylan and I having a good dynamic from the get-go, but I didn't ever feel that it really was impactful, or not that it wasn't impactful, but it wasn't distracting. Like it wasn't anything where I was like, oh, I'm going to go up and do more because the camera's here or whatever. You know, I would spend some time thinking about what I wanted to say. And then, you know, we'd go into the gym and basically I would just do my lift, and then we'd reconvene afterwards and talk about filming and shooting and stuff like that. Like it was very non-intrusive. It was very just like, this is like, you know, from Dylan's perspective, this is what he's doing. So there, like, it's just going to happen as it happens, and we'll do like a video thing about it later or something. Now,
this was not in your gym at the time though, right? So it was in a different gym. So how was it received there?
I don't know that we ever had anybody have it like take any issue with it, you know? Like I think people were stoked that they were like in the back of a video making a wisecrack or like giving someone bunny ears or whatever, and the gym owner was cool with it because it made his gym look awesome, and we, you know, maintained and still to this day do maintain a great relationship with the gym owner, the Strength Edge, and you know, I don't think it ever was something that was too distracting for other people, but again, maybe I'm just oblivious to that. So
yeah, were you monetizing from the jump?
I don't know. No.
Okay, because we weren't. Hell, I didn't start monetizing until 2020. Yeah, because what I was going to ask is how many times did videos get stifled because of music in the background? Oh, right. Because say if you're not monetizing, you don't give a shit about it. You're just like whatever. But then you wonder, like, man, how good of this could it have been? Right. Because it more than likely wasn't going to get pushed out because of AC/DC or whatever thumping in the background. Right. Yeah.
I think that decision to monetize maybe came with a shift to more like intentional educational content. And we had built like a decent following by that point before we decided to, like, I guess, turn ads on or whatever.
It's interesting because I'm going to say this hesitantly because I don't like scour YouTube like that much at all, but the best content seem to happen through that same kind of progress. It's like you're putting it out because you want to put it out, or you're putting it out because it might help build your online clientele. The main means of you putting it out is A, because you want to put it out, but B, because it might help the business, your sales, t-shirt, apparel, training, whatever it's going to be. Yeah. And then the monetization aspect was not even considered.
Yeah. And I mean, like
but that's flipped now, right? So people will intentionally get on, and I don't know what the minimum is, maybe 1,000 subscribers or something like that. And their whole goal is I need to get up to the number of subscribers so we can monetize. Yeah. And I see a difference in the content that's being produced to the people that go that route compared to the people that went the other route.
For sure.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I get it, because had I known, you know what I'm saying? I mean, had we all known, we probably would have monetized right from the beginning, but I don't know if it would have changed the content at all. Yeah. It just would have been, we probably wouldn't have sites right now because it was so many strikes because of music and shit. Throwing belts across the weight room. You know?
I mean, I think, you touched on something that I think is just like the crux of the whole thing. Is that you got to want to be putting it out, you know? And I think that, you know, Dylan and I still have discussions about the overall direction of the channel and what we want to do and how we can reshape and form and improve our content. But at the end of the day, like, that has to be there underneath it all. Like, we have to want to do it. Otherwise it just doesn't turn out. And we've done stuff that was less authentic, that we were like, okay, well, let's try to copy this style and like see if we can turn it into our own thing, because that's really popular right now. And maybe we're not as invested or whatever it is. But, you know, I think the stuff that we're most stoked about. And even if it's like the dumbest thing, we made a video mocking all the like brand new super stiff sleeves where we just like taped together cardboard boxes and we were like, these can hold up the most plates. And like just the dumbest video, but we were so stoked to make it.
Yeah.
And it popped off. Like people loved it because it was hilarious because we just like needed to be shitheads that day and make this dumb video about cardboard box knee sleeves. But
the best part about that is it worked, right? Because normally the ideas you think are going to do really well.
There's definitely those two for sure. There's a video. There's a video on our channel about sewing, and I think it has like 800 views or something. But I still to this day get people like, thanks for making that video, man. You know, like I lift equipped and it's good that there's a sewing video out there for like the few of us that do it. But yeah.
So when you moved into the equipped, what was the reason for it? Because you were at that thing and you saw that it was possible, right? But you still are competing for 5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Was it just, oh, this looks cool, so I'm going to do it? Or was there more intent behind it?
I mean, I make a lot of decisions based on this looks cool, I'm going to do it. Well, you know, you can tell by looking at me. But yeah, I think that and the hip issue, you know, I had this hip pain that started in maybe late 2014, early 2015. And it would be right as I was locking out my squat, I just feel like somebody stabbing a knife into my glute. And it happened on my conventional deadlift and my squat. And with deadlifts, I switched to sumo and it pretty much went away, which is weird. I feel like most people are usually backwards on that. They're like, I can't sumo, it hurts my hips, but I pull conventional, it's fine. But with squats, I was like, I just couldn't find a way around it. I had like brought the weight all the way down, worked my way back up, brought the weight all the way down, worked my way back up like 5 times now. And it just kept flaring up. So I was like, well, I don't know, maybe equipped will like make it not hurt or it'll, you know, do something productive. And it looked cool. I was like, you know, I can squat whatever, pounds, like 675 or whatever now. What if I squatted 800? You know what I mean? Like that would be way cooler. That's more weight. Yeah. So yeah, that was mostly what led to the decision.
Did it help?
It did. I squatted equipped pain-free for years and years. I think I only ever had one equipped session where my hip hurt. And it was like the end of a block. I think was starting to get sick. I lost some weight. The suit wasn't fitting right. And I just like, I knew it was going to be a shit day. And I went in and squatted, my hip hurt. And I was like, oh no, but it just wasn't really a thing.
Did you have to change your technique when you went into the gear?
No. And maybe I did, but I think the biggest thing for me in equipment, especially with the squat and maybe with the deadlift to a lesser extent, was trying to make the equipment like work for how I wanted to move. And trying not to change my technique, trying to squat like I knew I could squat, like I was strong with squatting, but to have the equipment like assist me in that. Because I had talked to a lot of people and received a lot of people telling me like, oh, you got to descend faster. You got to squat super wide and you can be more upright and all this stuff. And I tried that stuff and I was like, this just feels bad. It's like, but if I try to just like push really hard into the suit and like make it do what I want, it hurts way more. Like equipment wise bite, you know what I mean? But it feels great. Like I can move a lot of weight. So the biggest thing with my squat specifically was like, no, I want to squat exactly like how I do raw, but in equipment. And it worked. How
did your body respond to, because there's an increase in load, right? Especially in the squat and the bench.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably the squat. I think the squat, well, I'll ask you, to me, the squat's probably more problematic than what the bench is going to be just because the spinal loading, it's going to fuck your deadlift, you know, and stuff like that. So how did you acclimate to that? Was it slower over a period of time to where not all the sessions were in gear, or was it just straight into it with all the session in gear?
Pretty much just head first, full on. Like with Mike, I was like, I want to get into equipment. He's like, okay, you know, day one, full kit, squat single at 8, triple at 8, and 2 back off triples.
Okay.
Or 5s. I think he had me doing 5s.
Yeah.
And, day one was squat and bench, full equipment. Day 2 was full equipped deadlift, bench, another squat. Day 3 was squat, raw bench, bench accessory. Day 4 was maybe raw deadlift, maybe like a pause deadlift or something, an overload bench, and then stiff legs or rows or something like that.
The RPE answers my question, so we'll talk more about that, because the 8 RPE, your RPE is anchored with Mike, so his 8 is your 8. It's anchored, right? Yeah. So that controls that variable as far as it's not like 100 pounds more, because it's still based upon that RPE, where that's not always the case with some people, because their RPE can change. Obviously, the weight can change based upon the RPE, which is the purpose of the RPE, but their definition of an 8 can change radically. So at that point in time, you'd been working with Mike for how long?
By that point, probably 4 or 5 years.
Okay. So how hard was it for you to stay at that 8 RPE? Because the shit feels good when you have the gear on and it's popping, and it's a different RPE. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so what's funny enough, like my best raw squat at the time was 315 kilos, like 675. And my first equipped session, I did 300 kilos, 660 in full kit, knee wraps and everything. So it's like, I just did less than I could raw squat. And I don't know. Maybe I'm not a good meathead, but I've always had it like a pretty easy time kind of undershooting and being like, okay, this is good training. I don't really want to push past here. You know, I've gotten a lot of flack throughout my career from like buddies in the gym who are like, man, it never looks like you push hard. You know what I mean? And I've always been able to be like, no, I think like this slightly conservative jump is the right one. And I don't know. Like I have an easier time kind of holding back on some of that stuff and understanding, I guess, where the good training was going to be. So I didn't, maybe 3 or 4 sessions in, when I was like, oh, like I can add 15 kilos a session and it still feels good. Yeah. Then I was like, okay, let's go to the moon. But I think that first session I was a little, tentative with the hip still, because I was like, this feels good. Let's leave it here. Like, I don't want to push until my hip hurts again. Well, you got to get used to the bite.
Yeah. And that was a whole other thing. And like Single Ply is so sharp.
Oh yeah.
And
and it's in your hip.
I've talked to people who've done both, and they're like, multi-ply is like really compressive, but Single Ply is like just cutty.
No, it tears the shit out of you. It blisters the shit out of you. Right. Where I could see, your hip pain was through your glute, right?
Yep.
So it's in a different area. So you're going down, you feel that bite.
Yeah.
If with my hip, it hurt everywhere. So I would have been like, oh, fuck, is this a suit?
Right.
Or is this my hip?
Yeah.
But there's a distinct difference between how that feels compared to the joint, because it's just like you said, blistering hell.
Yeah. And it was like really deep in the joint too, right? And the suit bite is just very superficial. So, yeah.
Did that was there accumulated fatigue because of the heavier loads over the first meet prep that you had to really, really watch?
Probably. I think we did a good job of like monitoring it. And at the time, I think, the business wasn't the same as it is now. It didn't demand as much of my attention. I was able to like kind of program for my clients and spend a lot of time just like chilling. You know what I mean? Like my fatigue management, my ability to intentionally spend time just recovering, you know what I mean, was higher then. So I think we did a good job managing it, but it certainly was like the feeling of doing a heavy, full equipped squat, single, 2 or 3 back offs, heavy full equipped bench, 2 or 3 back offs, like every Monday after that session, which would take 4.5 or 5 hours, I would just like, I could feel it in my bones. You know what I mean? Like it was a whole different kind of fatigue in terms of how it felt. It wasn't like, oh, my muscles are sore. It was like my life is like, my skeleton is sore.
It's systemic.
Yeah. And that was definitely something to adjust to, of like understanding that like is okay. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh man, I think I maybe overdid it, kind of thing. Did you audible the other sessions in the week because of that? I mean, to an extent, I always did, right? Because we operated on RPE. It was like the other sessions, and specifically because of my hip, that day 3 sort of raw squat would be usually really toned down because it was, what can I do without pain? So I could have that day 1 where I could push hard in the equipment, and day 3 was like, okay, well, what can I squat that doesn't hurt? And sometimes that was, 40%.
Well, to compound that, you were doing 5s and you were doing more volume with the gear as well.
Yeah.
Which is going to create even more of that systemic fatigue.
Yeah.
So it obviously over a period of time, you're going to become acclimated to that, and then it's going to pull up. How did the first meet go?
I think it went really well. Having trouble remembering my first equip meet.
Yeah.
I think I was rehabbing my hip at the time, so I wasn't able to do, I don't think as much as I wanted. I might have even been told by somebody to not squat equipped, and just do like my raw squat and then bench and deadlift equipped. I don't know.
That seems very counterproductive.
Yeah. It wasn't Mike who told me that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Single. CPU 2016 402 418 760.
Yeah.
Here's the crazy thing as I was looking through this stuff from you is your deadlift got a really decent carryover from the single ply, which it shouldn't.
Yeah, I was always really good at using a deadlift suit. I feel like it gave me exactly what I needed. I feel like I got another 10% on my equipped deadlift. Is there
any way now with the 881 or the 400 kilos, was that conventional or sumo?
Sumo.
Was there any way that you set the suit that would be different than anybody else?
So I think the big thing I've noticed with a lot of equipped deadlifters is that I think again that not wanting to use stuff that was too tight, not wanting to like change my technique. I would get something that would allow me to get pulled into like a fully solid brace, whereas I would see a lot of equipped lifters with really tight straps. And I feel like that would just round them out, right? Whereas I felt like if you could use the straps just enough to kind of pull you into a little bit of extension, then I was like, my upper body was just a brick and I could pull whatever. So if I could get the suit set right and I could brace well enough, and I remember very intentionally pulling into like extra extension, specifically in like my pelvis and lumbar, just really pulling into that last little bit of extension, then the suit would help me pop it off the floor, which is going to be harder when you're super extended like that. So I could get more upright, I could get more extended, and it just like covered up for that little bit of weakness off the floor. And then I was in such a good position to lock out that it was no problem at all.
You think the suit kept your hips a tad higher too?
Maybe. Because I remember I'd have to like really pull down into them to get like a kind of pop off the floor, right? Because you have no lowering phase, right? So you kind of got to squat yourself down to find that tension. But yeah.
Yeah, because I've often, when I was pulling sumo, I always try to get the suit to kind of resemble the starting position of what my second rep would look like.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Which is fucking hard to do when it's your first, because you got to wedge in there.
Yeah.
And suit, you can't breathe, so it's, it's a lot of that, but the suit made it harder to get the hips where I would pull if I didn't have the suit.
Yeah.
So I always had this theory that if it holds your hips just a little higher, then you're kind of in that position of that second rep. But if you tried to do that without the suit, with a gauge to guess, then you're kind of fucked.
I think that was a big thing, was that feedback, right? Because I'd get this like bite right in the front of my thighs. And I knew if I could just like find that bite and just like pull in a little more than I wanted to, because it hurt really bad, that was like, I was going to pull a rocket. Like it was just going to be stupid off the floor. So for me, it was like finding that suit bite was, I think, indicative of exactly what you're talking about, right? Like having that feedback externally on my skin helped me make sure that position was going to be the same every single time.
I have a feeling that 400 kilo deadlift was a big, audacious goal. Like it was something you were really, really shooting and working for a long time, to be able to get that. How did it feel when you did it?
Oh man, I was crying, and yeah, it was such a huge thing. So that meet, I squatted 400. I hit a bench PR. I think I benched 262. And then I pulled that 400, and I had tried the 400 maybe twice before. And during the lead up to maybe my previous meet, we had done this. We won some funding from TELUS, like a big. Do you guys have TELUS in the States?
I don't know what that is.
A telecommunications company. Yeah. It's like Bell, Rogers, Media, whatever. So they fund these like sort of grassroots documentaries and stuff. We entered this contest thing, had everybody like flood their website and vote for us 1 million times, and we won this funding. So we made medium length documentary called The Powerlifter.
Yes.
And in a lot of it, I'm talking about how like this 400 is my goal, right? And one of the lines was that everybody has their own 400. And for me, it was absolutely this like big momentous thing that I had like glued in my head and had been chasing and chasing and chasing. And I knew that I was like on the cusp of being able to do it. So yeah, to finally get it there was like massive. It's like I was talking about with the first meet. It's like you're able to take all of this work and all of these emotions and all of this like just like pent up everything that went into getting here and put it into this like moment, and that sort of like actualization of all that just makes it so like worthwhile. You know what I mean? It's like acknowledgement of all that work.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was huge.
2 points. It's a great documentary. I've watched it probably 3 times.
Oh, nice.
So probably the first time it came out, watched it again yesterday. And I think everybody should watch that as a powerlifter. I think there's a lot of points in there. There's a lot of takeaways in there beyond just being the powerlifter. Some of the things you talked about earlier, trying to balance all these other things, it's all in there. Yeah. And it's following the journey, of that whole thing. Was the second part of when you hit something like that, then that realization comes back like 5 minutes later. You're awesome. It's awesome for till you get home that night.
Yeah.
When everything's fucked up. You have suits. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to figure out how to take care of the blisters from the suit.
Yeah.
And all this other shit. Was that the last single ply meet you did?
Yeah.
Okay. And why go back into the raw? Because what I don't want to say that was that anticlimactic, because you could say yes or no. It's a stupid question, because all those things just build onto other things.
Right.
But for you with the single ply, was that like that chapter for now is closed and now let's go on to the next?
Initially, it wasn't.
Okay.
So that meet was in, I think, March of 2020. And we got home and Dylan got really sick. And then we started hearing about this like COVID thing on the news. And then the whole hell broke loose, right? Like the whole, everything shut down, blah, blah, blah. So I wasn't able to train. I put a rack in my condo basement, like in this common area. So equipped was out of the question for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And in making that transition back to raw out of necessity, I kind of fell back in love with it and was like, you know what? Like that was a big thing that I was chasing for a while there, that 400. And, I feel like I did everything I had in me. And I think that's like the perfection that you chase as a powerlifter. And I think that you don't often get it where like all three come together. You know what I mean? You go 9 for 9, you hit the PRs, like the magic numbers you have in your head on like, oh, maybe a miracle day, like it happened. You know what I mean? So I felt good moving on from there. And initially I had planned to try to like make my way to the World Games and go to Equipped Worlds that year and all that kind of stuff. But through the process of just like life being drastically different for the next couple of years and us starting the HQ project and building out our own space, and again, like needing to train raw because that was the only way to do it in my basement. I wasn't going to get my wife to spot me down there and put her life at risk.
Well, these straps got to be pulled up, bench shirts need to put on. There's a lot of, some people do it. I don't know how.
Yeah.
All credit to them.
Yeah.
But they're I don't even want to say the minority because it's smaller than a minority.
Yeah. Minuscule number.
Yeah, very, very small number.
Yeah.
How did your hip feel when you So now you have COVID, so you're training in your basement. So there's going to be a reduction to some degree in load management, stuff like that. But now you're going from a suit, which is somewhat compressive and supportive, to not. So did enough time elapse that the hip strengthened? You know, I don't know what was the issue with that, but found a way to at least compensate to be able to do the lifts.
So funny enough, the training cycle right after that equipped like big meet that was so amazing was maybe one of the best raw training cycles I've ever done in my life. Like I hit crazy numbers in that basement. It was the first time I squatted 320, 705, benched 200 kilos with like room left in the tank. First time ever. And pulled like 370 for a double or something like that. Like I was on fire. And I think, you know, coming out of that equipped block, I mean, obviously I was strong as shit, right? Yeah. So I put that into a really successful training cycle. My hip was like, not great, not bad, manageable. And then after that training cycle, where I had all of that like insane success in my basement, I was like, okay, well, let's keep this going, you know, like had my little deload, time to start the next block. The wheels just fell off. Like it was, my hip got super bad, I think.
Well, fell off. Were you still in lockdown at the time, or were you out of lockdown? Okay.
Yeah, no, it was still in lockdown.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, you know, I'm making hella gains in my basement here. Everything feels great. Let's keep it going. And like I started having shoulder problems, and like I was missing deadlifts, and it just like, I don't know, overall, I think I needed just like on a large scale, had a big refractory period from having had so much successful training for a little bit. And I think that's kind of, there's maybe like a natural ebb and flow to lifters progressions like that, where like it might've been better for me to just step away from powerlifting for a bit at that point, because it was rough. Like it was not good. And I think that, you know, we found a way through it for sure, but it was very much like we're going like way down in bar weight on everything, and the amount my hip can tolerate is super low right now, and my deadlift feels like crap, and I just can't like get it feeling right. And it was just it was not pretty.
The first time I had Dave Hoff on, he said something that fucked with my head for a while, because I find it to be more true than not, that lifters that are in for a long time, you know, decade, multiple decades, he saw a pattern when he was coming up through Westside with the people that were there before him. They would make good progress, then they'd stagnate for like a year and a half, 18 months, 24 months, and then they'd bump again, then they'd stagnate, bump again. So in his brain, he just kind of rationalized, this is what happens. So when you hit that stagnant phase, just be smart.
Just
don't be a dumb fuck.
Let it happen. Yeah.
Just let it happen. Just write it out and just wait for the next one. And eventually one of them's going to put you out, right? Because it's just get older, right?
Yeah.
But instead of trying to force through it, he kind of learned early on, let's just take this for what it is. Yeah. Maybe there's no PR meets coming up, and just wait for the next bump. There it is. Go. Yeah. And then that fucked with me. It really did. Because then I go back and I'm looking at like my own shit. I'm looking at like, oh my God, there it is. Like everybody that I know is like, fuck, there it is. Like, fuck, there it is. And then, you know, the geek in me is like, well, how could you avoid this? Right. So you don't accumulate because there's damage associated with it.
Sure. Yeah,
like how could you preemptively do this without accumulating the damage? Which I don't know yes, I think it's possible, but I don't know if the person would do it.
Yeah. I think it's probably like a time where, okay, let's like totally switch gears and like train like a bodybuilder for 4 months. You know what I mean? And I think especially as an experienced lifter with a lot of, you know, reps and a lot of time doing the power lifts, like your strength is going to come back so quick. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the things I've learned with coming out of the hip injury and now into like kind of a knee thing that flares up and down is, you know, if I have to take 4 or 5 weeks and like not squat at all, I can be back to some of my best squats in 8 or 9 weeks. You know what I mean? As long as I'm healthy, and I can do the thing, I can be at my strongest, like pretty quick. You know what I mean?
Does that fuck with your head though? Because then you start looking at your frequency and everything that you're doing, and you start thinking, oh, wait a minute. You know what I'm saying? Like, do I really need to be squatting twice a week, or could I just squat once every 2 weeks?
Yeah.
You know, it becomes this.
Yeah. And I mean, so that was one of the things that when Mike and I had all that success right after the equip meet, I was squatting usually once a week, deadlifting once a week, maybe once every other week. And I would go in and I would do 3 singles. And then that was my squat workout. And I might do like a couple doubles of pauses later in the week or something. But that was very, very low volume, very low for me anyways, frequency. Yeah. And that was super successful. And then we tried to keep riding that, but
the tricky part that goes in with my head with that is, in essence, that's a peak block, you know, which serves its purpose, but the conditioning isn't going to be there and the strength isn't going to be there for when you come out of that. I think the reason I'm stating this, I think a lot of people fool themselves into they'll reduce their frequency or their volume or however they're training, and they see this great progress. And it may not be peaking for a meet, but then they're like, wait a minute, maybe I'm doing way too much. And then bam, something happens because now they don't have the conditioning, the resilience, you know, to be able to
work capacity and stuff.
So it becomes this mind fuck, right? Because powerlifting, it's the ultimate mind fuck. Yeah. Right. Because everything you did to get to where you are is the opposite of what you need to do to get better.
Well, it's all delayed onset, right? Like you're saying with that peaking block, it's like you're doing this peaking stuff now and you're coming into the gym and you're smashing shit. But it's not this stuff that made you strong. You know what I mean? Like it's the other stuff before that led up to that you're not thinking about now when you're strong or associating with being strong. So you got to really zoom out to kind of try to pick apart the bigger picture with, you know, coming up with long-term plans and stuff like that. But
so with this meet that you just did, which was in the Caribbean, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What was the process like training for that? And then I think you fucked your knee up. So what was the outcome out, you know, the positives, and then also what do you think led to the knee issue?
So the knee issue started in June of 2022. Okay. Heading into IPF Worlds, was in Sun City, South Africa, and training was going really well. Like my squat, I moved my stance in a little bit and my squat was feeling amazing. I was like, man, I'm finally like pretty close to a full 120. You know, I can run my belly into my quads a little bit in the bottom, and like, we're going to squat something stupid. Like, this feels so good. And my knee started getting swollen and just swelling, you know, a little bit resistant to like go through the range of motion sometimes. But I was like, I don't know. At this point, I'm 3 weeks out from Worlds. My knee's a little swollen, like whatever. Yeah. Just keep going, do the meet. After the meet, it was really swollen and really resistant to moving around. So kind of like worked around with that for a little bit, got it back to being workable. I think it was shortly after that I started working with Seth, and he helped me like bring things back online, get back to being pain-free. Headed into nationals the following year in March, and had, you know, a quick little block. Maybe by the time I got pain-free, I had 3 or 4 weeks. I'd been accumulating some training and it was going pretty good. Had 3 or 4 weeks of being like totally pain-free into nationals, competed at nationals. And after nationals, my knee was like really bad again. So I was like, you know what? I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's like, it's workable. I can kind of do the thing. So we're just going to keep going. You know, I got this North American meet coming up. I want to try to, you know, set the bar, take the total so I can do Worlds the next year. So I didn't really ease off of the knee heading into the meet in Cayman Islands. So I kind of just tolerated a higher level of pain and was like, it's going to be a little shitty. But again, things are going really well. You know, my squat especially is feeling good. Bench is feeling good. And, you know, if we can get a couple decent deadlifts in, like, I'll be there on meet day.
Yeah, of course. Sometimes it is.
Yeah, sometimes it is. So, you know, like heading into this meet, I had dealt with a fair bit of pain and kind of knew. I was like, you know what, I'm going to make some appointments for right after the meet, because I bet whatever symptoms there are going to be very visible when I get back. Because I'm going to like, I'll be inflamed. I'm going to go hit a PR. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I went and I hit a PR. I squatted 705 in a meet for the first time, and then came back and got it MRI'd and X-rayed and all this kind of stuff. And Yeah, there's like a tear in some cartilage, there's arthritis, and there's some like bone spurs or like bodies in there somewhere. So yeah, I mean, currently in the process of coming back from that again, but taking a much longer period of time to get back to being pain-free and hopefully being able to train pain-free for a lot longer.
What's the symptom with it? So what do you feel?
So it clicks and catches a lot now.
Yeah.
The swelling is down, but being really swollen and resistant to moving is a big part of it. But yeah, for now, it gets a little swollen sometimes after training, and it like clicks and catches and is pretty painful when it is. But again, like at this point right now, feeling pretty good with it, but yeah.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physical therapist, but nothing you said in there sounds major to me. Like
no
arthritis, bone spurs. I mean, there's nothing in there that time, and rest and, treatment.
Yeah. They had talked about scoping it to get rid of those like bodies that are in there. But I guess the surgeon got back to me and said, it looks like they're still attached. So they don't want to go in and mess around with anything yet.
The spurs?
Yeah. Because initially in the MRI, they just said they were 10 to 12 millimeter bodies floating or whatever. The surgeon said, I think they're attached. We're not going to operate. So for right now, I took 4 or 5 weeks post meet. Like last week was the first time I got back on a bar and squatted. And I started from kneeling on it to try to get it to bend all the way, and then like extending it out and trying to get it to straighten all the way. And I did that like twice a day. And that was my training.
When you say kneeling on it, like kneeling on a bench or kneeling on the floor?
On something padded, because pressure on it was really painful for a while there.
For those that are listening, so just hip in line with the knee and just leaning back.
Trying to sit back and get as much range of motion as I can before it got pissed off.
How far in pain did you go, or would you go?
Usually like a 3 or 4 out of 10, I would say, not beyond that, because I felt if I went beyond that, the pain would persist for longer than just me pushing into it. Yeah. And I wanted to try to avoid that.
With shit that I've dealt with, if I go past that, it inflames. Yeah. So then you're kind of fucked, because now you got to wait for the inflammation to go away, because it's increasing the range of motion, which is the first goal, right? Increase range of motion. And then from that, where did you go on to?
So from there, I went on to like single leg movements, trying to do like a basic split deadlift. So I'd have my like one leg in front, the other leg would be on the floor behind me, bent almost in like a lunge position. But then I would try to hinge through the hip, because that RDL kind of pattern on that leg was super rough at first. I couldn't do it with body weight. I'd be shaking and it was terrible. So I worked on that and goblet squats, just like trying to be able to do a squat and put some pressure through that leg and through that quad.
So when you're coming back from an injury like that, are you purposely looking for movements that are going to be bad like that don't have a lot of pain, but can increase in range of motion over time?
So usually it's kind of like a 2-pronged approach, and I've like interpreted this from what I did with Seth. I don't know if this is his philosophy or not, but it seems like you can come at it from 2 angles. You come at it from the angle of, what can I do that's going to be hard for it to do, that I can do really light and progress with like range of motion or comfort as the metrics of progress on that side. And then on the other side, what can I do to actually load it without pain? So like a high pin squat or something where I can put some weight into it, but avoid the painful ranges of motion. So I try to find, kind of one for each and find, exercises that check those boxes on either side, and then, progress those for a wave of it. And then the next block will be like, okay, how can we do those same things, but get more specific, right? Get back closer to something that's actually squatting. So
based upon the injury, so if we're talking about specificity, we got a line, so boom, here's the middle. With what you're talking about, you're like 4 degrees out of specificity, then you're going to work it kind of into that, because it hurts. You loss of range of motion, swelling hurts. It's fucked up, right? So the more fucked up, the further out you need to go. Where with your hip, did you kind of treat it with the same philosophy?
No, I don't think I was as smart back then. I think that I was smart enough to be like, okay, well, let's take weight off the bar. You know what I mean? If I got to go down to a 70 kilo squat, I will. and that's fine. But I don't think I ever regressed further from the squat. Like I didn't really come at it with different movements. I was like, the squat is enough. Like I can squat with the bar, so that's fine. And I think one of the things that's allowed me to have more success coming back from these kinds of things now is being open to regressions further away in specificity. So
if you kept that, at ground zero, so there's no regressions, then you had to put something in that was restorative, needling or some shit like that. So did you use any of those things, and did any of those things make a difference?
I tried everything under the sun for my hip, and I had every imaging and assessment under the sun for my hip. I never had any answers, and I never really got anything out of the treatments, I don't think.
I would agree.
Like I had dye injected MRIs, I had everything, and people were like, I don't know, could be maybe something with your back, maybe, question mark. They're like, you don't feel it till you get 220 kilos on the bar though? And I was like, well, it depends on the day. Like sometimes I can squat in the morning, it feels like shit, and I can go back in 4 hours later and smash work, and it'll feel great.
Yeah.
No pain. And sometimes I can feel it with an empty bar, and sometimes I don't feel it at all. Like it was the hip thing was it was Russian roulette. I had no idea what to expect on any given day. And it seemed like I could have almost no impact on it. I tried changing warm-up protocols and doing little hip drills, and I had one physio tell me that I needed to change my gait, like the way that I walked. And I was like, is that really going to impact how I move when I'm under
I know
500 pounds? I mean, at this point, like, fuck it, I'll try whatever. But now, I never really found anything that seemed like it made a distinct impact on it.
It's a weird world when you're a lifter, because you'll seek out every modality possible.
For sure.
But then everybody you seek out knows the answer,
for a minute.
And it just needs more time with whatever the answer is. And then sometimes there is no answer. Sometimes the answer is just, it got better on its own, regardless of what they were doing. But then you think what they did helped.
Yeah.
But when Dr. Locke was out, and I kind of knew this, but I forgot about it. Like with low back pain, most people will get better with their low back pain within 4 weeks, no matter what's done. It's just naturally just kind of like heal. But if they're getting treatment done, like as soon as it pops or whatever you want to say, and then 3 weeks later they're better, they think it was that, but it's going to get 90% or whatever it was. I don't want to quote exactly, but 90% is going to get better anyhow. And I'm like, oh, okay. So all these people that think this is the greatest thing in the world, it may not be that, but yet as meatheads, we're still going to do whatever it is
we can
to be able to figure it out. Because sometimes the way I always kind of saw it was, even if it's psychological, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
trick me.
I'll pay a couple $100 for a good placebo. You know what I mean? Like, especially when it comes to being able to to do the thing. And that was the hardest part with the knee. Was for a while there, it took me out of like knowing what to do in the gym. And I just didn't train my lower body for a couple of weeks, like 4 weeks or so. But I think that was the first time in a decade that I hadn't trained my lower body for that long. And I got depressed. Like I was terrible headspace, really, really bad. And, shortly after that, I started working with Seth, and he's like, well, you can do this other stuff that isn't squatting. And I was like, are you sure? And then that allowed me to be able to at least have a roadmap and a plan of attack. But I got so hung up on that, trying to do the thing. And I think the pendulum for me swung, a couple different ways, because at first I was like, if it's not squatting, it's stupid. And like, I don't need to do it. Like single leg, la-di-da, whatever the hell, like that's not going to help me. But the thing is, like, it allows you to move the joint and work the muscle and do the thing without hurting it or making it worse. Or even if it just changes it enough that your brain's like, no, I don't think we have to send pain signals here. Like it gives you something to do.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I was kind of like against that. I was like, oh, that's all silly stuff. And now I'm very much back on the side of like, oh, let's introduce some other movements. Let's like train the joint in a bunch of different ways. Because it used to just be like, well, I'll take load off the bar. I'll keep squatting and it'll get better. And I think this way is maybe a little better. Even if it has the exact same like outcome, I think the fact that you, again, have agency, that you're like, I'm doing this, I'm making this better, instead of feeling like you're at the mercy of like, oh, when can I put weight on the bar? Because when's my hip going to allow it?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm actively doing these things to make it better. So you expect it to be better. So you start to put together a timeline in your head, and you can like, take steps to make that a realistic timeline. And I think a lot of that stuff, and again, like I credit Seth with kind of opening my eyes to a lot of this stuff and helping me figure it out. And it's kind of changed my philosophy and how I've started programming and, dealing with my lifters' injuries and certainly my own. But
well, everything in training has a place and time. We'll all admit that.
Yeah.
We just won't do it, or I think there's good reason for it though, too, because you've been doing this for over a decade. That a lot of these modalities have probably been introduced to you, but it was the wrong time.
Sure.
And it wasn't the right place. So you're like, what the fuck is the point of this now?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, but now it makes complete sense because you're on a path. When you're not on a path, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You're just spinning in circles. As far as just basic recovery modalities, say from training session to training session. And this is a question that I have to ask, even though I don't like asking it, because the answer is to not need them in the first place, because your training's structured well enough that it's not necessary. But recovery modalities, if it's steam, sauna, ice baths, all this other shit that kind of goes out there. The first thing I think when somebody starts implementing a lot of those is, why do you feel like you need to implement them? Right. Maybe there's something volume that needs to be manipulated. So that being said, because it's a topic that it doesn't go away.
No.
Like everybody wants to be able to do their thing and then do other things after their thing to be able to help them recover faster.
Yeah.
Which there is something called anabolics, which can do that. But I would even argue the fact, I don't really think that's how that really works either. Okay. Right. But with that being said, there are times you can get a little bit behind the 8 ball. Right. And that's a tricky place to be in, because if it's 4 weeks out from a meet, you just kind of, this is the horse you rode in on, fuck it, you got to ride it out. Now, if it's 6, 8 weeks out, you're like, oh shit, I can manipulate volume, but I could also do X, Y, or Z to help recover from whatever that session was. Have you found anything to be able to fit those spaces to where you overreach a little bit? Here's this session coming up in 2 days. You can modify it, but you don't really
want to.
Well, you don't want to, but sometimes you can't afford to.
True.
Depending upon where it falls.
Yeah.
Optimally, you're going to adjust it, but you get inside 7 weeks. Everybody's a little different.
Yeah.
You get in close to a peaking block, you're kind of fucked. Have you found anything to be able to help with that? So
I think the things that I will try to implement are probably like pretty simple, maybe even to the point of sounding silly. But I will try to like start taking naps, or give myself 20 minutes where I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to like put in earplugs and like lay back and just like not be stimulated or not pay attention and try not to think about anything, like almost like a meditation or something. But I'm just going to like shut down and try to like get my body to do a little of its natural R&R kind of stuff. And then just, finding ways to like reduce stress. If I can afford to up calories, I'll do that. I'll try to shift my nutrition a little bit, maybe, so that I'm getting a little bit more carbs in and around my workout if I'm not already doing that. But yeah, as far as like heat and cold and that kind of stuff, I haven't really, I don't know, maybe it's because I haven't really messed around with it. I've never really felt compelled to like buy into a lot of that stuff. But I will try to like, I'll try to get a little bit extra sleep or take a nap or, just spend intentional periods of time with less stimulus. And I think that's maybe where like massage and some of that stuff kind of falls in, where you're like, because you lay there and depending on how painful, the massage is, you're kind of forced to like not pay attention to anything for a while. And I think that's where you're going to get some like restorative benefit from a lot of those modalities. Right, is because it's not because of the active thing that's happening. It's because it's forcing you to be passive. Yeah. And it's forcing you to like not be on your phone or not be thinking about things or solving business problems or attending to your family or other, obligations or things that you feel excited to do even, but just like doing nothing, shutting it down, shutting it off, and like finding those little periods where you can, give yourself a break.
Yeah. Let's take a break real quick since you just said that, because I got to go to the bathroom.
Good segue.
So I want to call out the limited edition apparel. The link is in the description. As I've spoken about before, the limited edition apparel is apparel that I basically come up with. So some of the designs suck, some of them not so much. It's a weird thing. The ones that I think are going to do really well usually don't. The ones that I think aren't going to do really well do really well. Either way, they're all limited runs, so it changes, every single month. But all limited edition items are tri-blend material with, the cut that everybody wants now that's a little bit tighter on their arms so they can show off how big their fucking arms are. The limited edition items directly support the podcast. So head over, pick up your shirt today. Could be a hoodie, could be shorts. We got these ball hugger shorts right now, which I would never wear, but I was told they were super popular. But you know what? They were wrong, because they're still sitting there and I probably should discount them right now. Anyhow, if you want to see the discount on the ball hugger shorts, head over to the limited edition apparel, link in the description box. You guys are selecting Merrick for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. So there's a table talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are, thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk Merrick Health for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. To piggyback on what we were talking about, which was the restoration and recovery, what I haven't got into a lot of was the business aspect, because you started the business, 2 years after the powerlifting, but they both kind of coincide and grow at the same time. The business is kind of like training, right? Where it's, I don't want to say it's simple, because it's never simple, but it's less time consuming at the beginning, because a lot of it is just waiting for orders, or just you're trying to figure out what to do to fill the gaps, because there's a lot of gaps. Like, oh cool, I got this gap, we can do this and this, and then there's no gaps. Right. And then there's no gaps, and then you're trying to fit your training in with all that. Then it becomes a process of what needs, like with training, what needs to be eliminated. The training economy, and then the density and all that. So as this is been trying to balance, is a bad word, right? Because it doesn't work that way. People can say all they want, but it never works that way. So it's one thing's prioritized more than the other. So I would assume as you go into a meet, the meet prep's going to be more prioritized. The other drops a little bit more. But interestingly, the content can become better, right? Because the meet prep becomes better content than not meet prep. And so there's this dichotomy of trying to figure that all out. Then there's like the injury, what you're like, part of it's like, cool, there's a story, but how long can that story play out, until the next one comes in there? And your business is, the training aspect, but the content aspect, which basically feeds the training aspect as well. So as that's grown, what demands has it put onto the training that you didn't expect?
I think that the biggest thing is time management, right? Like having, and this is actually interesting. I just within the last 4 or 5 weeks since North Americans, I've taken Monday morning, and that's like my training time. And I don't just mean that's the time I train, but that's the time where I sit down with the spreadsheets and I plug everything in, and I make sure everything from the last week is tracked, and I record a little video for Mike and tell him how training went. And I pull all the stuff from all the different apps from my scale and whatever else, and I send that to my guy who's doing my nutrition. Shout out to Derek. And since I've started doing that, it just feels so like I feel completely reinvigorated with my training again, because I think for a long time, so much of there's like a certain part of your brain that thinks about training, right? And I think like anything, it's a finite resource. And I think when you coach and are also a lifter who's, trying to be pretty competitive, those two things kind of conflict. So the time you spend outside of your training thinking about training is always about your clients, right? Picking apart and like losing sleep, like, oh, like her shoulder's not getting better, like, or, his deadlift is stalled, like waking up in the middle of the night needing to write stuff down. Like, you don't do that with your own training after a while. You kind of lose that. That gets deprioritized. And I think that's probably the biggest thing is realizing that had been kind of like pushed off to the side, and that probably, some of the things that I was frustrated about as an athlete and frustrated about with my training and, lack of progress or, lack of progress to my own insane standards was maybe due to the fact that I wasn't giving it enough of my headspace. I wasn't analytical. I wasn't picking it apart. I wasn't thinking about it. And that's part of why I love having a coach who I trust implicitly, is because I definitely want to offload that. Like, I don't want to be solely responsible for it, but I still need to have some responsibility and some agency in it. You know what I mean? So I think realizing that got, kind of shelved, and then recently kind of like trying to reclaim that and be like, no, I'm an athlete. I need to set aside my time to be an athlete and feel like an athlete, think about being an athlete. And, making the time for that has been like a huge turnaround in how I feel session to session even. And having that time each week to be like, what do I need to do better this week? Where did I fall short last week? What can I push harder? What can I change? What can I, modify, do more of, less of, whatever. So yeah, I think that's probably, it was something that really snuck up on me. Like I didn't realize that I wasn't paying like any attention to my training, and probably half of it wasn't getting logged. And I had a couple different places to log stuff, but one of the places where I get to look back and, kind of keep better track of things, it wasn't getting logged in. The stuff that Mike needed to do the programming was all getting logged, but my own analysis and investment, I think, hadn't been there as a result of just being so busy and like putting all the other priorities above my own training.
I think one of the things that happens is because you started training because you love training, right? It filled a void, in your life that was like, fuck, this is awesome.
100%.
That first meet, you're like, holy shit, this is it. This is what I want to do. And it's fun, and you love it. And then when your life basically becomes all around that. So let's just say let's just call it powerlifting, right? So there's training, but then there's powerlifting, right? So powerlifting is, you fell in love with the training, but powerlifting just happened to be the discipline of the training that is associated and anchored to what you fell in love with. And then that powerlifting becomes your livelihood.
Yep.
Right. It's how you make and earn a living. Then it becomes the content you're producing. Then you're an entrepreneur. So there is no 9 to 5, so it's all the time.
Yep.
So powerlifting then becomes your entire life. All your friends are from powerlifting. There's very few that are outside of that, and so then slowly over a period of time, your love of training begins to erode because it's replaced with powerlifting.
Yeah.
Right. And this will catch up with everybody who's in this situation at some point. It could be after they quit competing, then like, fuck, like, I don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
Because now they're not training for a meet. They're not training for anything. But it's remembering that the training or some aspect of the training is what you fell in love with, not powerlifting.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it's
100%.
Like powerlifting it's bigger than just your own training from a life perspective, because it does all these other, and it's awesome that it can do all these other things.
100%. Yeah.
It's awesome it can do all these other things, but it erodes what you love about all of it. And if, in your case, from what you're telling me, being part of that agency, being part of the person that's helping to figure out what the problems are, were part of what you loved about it. So you can outsource it. So you're still doing what you want to do, which is the training part. But even that over a period of time becomes work.
Yeah.
And a job.
Yeah.
Because it's being filmed and all these other things that are associated with that. Where if you can always find a way to reconnect with why you're doing it in the first place, then, everything else then gets better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the other thing is that when training and lifting go poorly, like that makes everything feel worse because powerlifting is all of this. It's like if I have a shitty day of squatting and my hip hurts or my knee hurts or I can't or whatever, it's like, I don't want to film content. Like, I don't want to I almost always want to work with my clients because it's like one of the best parts of my day. But a lot of the times, a lot of the stuff around the business and around the content and around all these other avenues of powerlifting suffers. And I don't want to do it, or it feels bad, or you're like, if training isn't going well, you're like, well, that's going to make the business go poorly because my performance is my content is my, client flow for the business and all this stuff is like tied in, you know what I mean? So there's these other kind of pressures that may or may not be there that are tied to your training. You're like, well, I have to PR now. You know what I mean? Like I have to win this meet, or I have to set this record, or I have to go to, win the national team spot and whatever, because it's all tied together. And if this doesn't go well, everything else is going to suffer.
Yeah. But you still need to be able to step back and look and ask, is this true?
Exactly.
Right. Because I could debate at this point how you podium, it's not going to make any difference to your training at all. Then that and everybody knows that, but there's still that other part of you that's because you can use it as drive. Yeah. And anything as a competitor that you can use as drive, you need to fucking use this drive. Yeah. Like I need to do this or my business is going to fail. Yeah. Like it's complete bullshit, it, but if you can use it,
believe it for a second or two,
use it and then you just roll with it that way. But finding some way to protect, like you just said there, to carve that place out, to just reground with that. Cause it's the better the lifters become, unless they're completely outside of the sport, like their jobs outside of the sport, everything's outside of the sport except for their training. Yeah. Everything is, they don't run into it as much as the ones that it's all in there because that can become a death trap to a lot because then they probably stick around longer than they should. They end up getting more fucked up than they should because they're under this false pretense that this is what's needed for them to actually, build their business or whatever it's going to be. Yeah. And I could make an argument that it's actually what's holding the business back if I really wanted to.
Yeah, I think you could easily do that. Yeah.
But there's that balance in there with that because but when it can get bad, it can get really bad to where you're training, you don't even want to train, which isn't uncommon. I mean, people, you do this for a long time. That's not uncommon. But when that starts to become more times than not, you need to check yourself. Yeah. Because normally it's the situation that you're talking about, that these other facets are, I don't want to say they're taking up too much of your mental space. You're not giving enough mental space to the training, what you love, like how to figure it out, right? Because training's one thing. It's I love the training aspect, but there's a lot of things I don't love about it. Like I don't like my accessory shit I do during the week. I don't like it at all. I really don't. I don't like it, but I'm going to do it because it makes what I want to do on the weekends better. But there's a process that still goes into here's what I want to do before the end of the year. I got to do this, this, and this for this to happen. If I don't do this, the likelihood that game, figuring it all out. That actually becomes a little bit more of the love for a lot of people than what I think they give themselves credit for. Yeah. Because it's figuring it out. And then you got to also figure out, am I lying to myself right now? Or was that just bullshit?
Yeah, I think that's part of what's always appealed to me about the like programming side of things and, analysis of people's movements and that kind of stuff is it's complex multi-systems problem solving. You know what I mean? You got to figure out why this person's lift isn't getting better. Or why it got so much better just recently so that you can either replicate that or change things away from that. And I think, with the number of things you have to kind of check through, it just becomes like a really consuming, engaging kind of process of breaking this down and picking apart all the little pieces. And everybody has their different ways of kind of organizing and periodizing and what data they track and what they use and don't use and that kind of stuff. And I think that becomes like a real attractive and engaging thing to do when it comes to, the programming. And if you lose being able to do some of that with your own programming, you lose like a connection to it, I think.
I believe, I 100% believe so.
Yeah.
And I think you also lose the connection that your clients have with you, right? Because you have a connection with the coach, which it's in there, right?
Yeah.
But your clients have that connection with you. And many of them probably also want to be accountable for some of the problem solving aspects of all that as well. Some probably don't, right? Some do, but won't say they want to. There's
that's true too.
There's a lot of factors that kind of play into all that. At what point in time throughout this whole process did you realize that you could actually build a business and a career off of this?
So when I was working at that sort of like box gym, I kind of knew I was good at it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, my clients are getting results. My clients are sticking around. I think that means I'm doing a good job. You know what I mean? Like I saw other trainers either, struggling to get clients or being given clients and losing them right away, or their clients weren't getting results or whatever. And I noticed that like, hey, my clients really like what they're doing. They like me. We have good relationships. I think this is a thing I could, try to push and run with. So coming from that sort of like box gym into this like the back of another gym where we started what's now the Strength Edge, I had enough clients that I was like, I can make a go at this. And I don't think I ever had, dreams of grandeur or like trying to turn it into anything bigger than it was. It was just, I wanted to coach people and, lift and spend most of my time at a gym. And, that's what it was. And it kind of almost just naturally evolved one thing after another, meeting Dylan, talking about, making videos and then starting to make some. And that just things just kind of snowballed and evolved more almost by like necessity of it just going that way than it was like a super intentional, I'm going to make a business and it's going to have, we're going to make our own apparel and we're going to like do all this kind of stuff. It was just, I think we made like t-shirts with dumbass shit on them. Like, I think we had a shirt that just said push it or eat it on the back. And like, I don't know, we just did what we wanted to do. But
that's apparel is another interesting one too, right? Because the things you think are going to sell well, don't,
it's hard to predict.
The things that you don't think are going to do shit do really well. And, kind of plays into that. But as your business has grown, other tiers, they open up the apparel as an example of that. So you just want to train people, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, fuck, now I got to deal with like apparel. Like, how do we do this? And then how do we fulfill it? Are we going to ship it? Or are somebody else going to ship it? How do you market it? Where do we put it? So there becomes that aspect. And then your client base grows. Yeah. And you got to bring coaches underneath you. So now you got to figure out how do you fucking manage the coaches, so they don't do this. And now the YouTube starts popping off. It's like, well, fuck, now we got to manage like thumbnails and titles, so there's the business becomes this ever growing monster of a time suck that requires, prioritization into certain segments that none of them are guaranteed.
No,
right?
No.
And so it's worse than training because it would be like training, but doing a powerlifting meet first and then an Olympic weightlifting and then CrossFit and then trying to figure out how to make it all work.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they all can be their own distinct businesses in themselves, but not one of them does well enough to actually be the business.
Only one. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them, and you need them all, which is, I'm in the same boat. I've been doing it 25 fucking years.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck, like, do I want to take on another one? But what if it's the one that works?
Yeah.
And so how have you managed that mess?
Good people. That's 100% it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if I would have gone much further than having like a really good coaching practice. Had it not been for, for Dylan and now for Chelsea, who's come onto the team, because Dylan and I are not good at organizing things. But like getting the right people and the coaches that work for Calgary Barbell, like I don't need to micromanage them. You know what I mean? Like I would trust them to program for me, like 100%, no questions asked. So I don't know if I've been like fortunate or if I just have like a good sense for people maybe, but the people that I've been able to bring on to the team have been able to help things grow. And there's still oversight. You know what I mean? Like I you ever have those days where you're like, man, is my job just meetings? Like, do I just do meetings for a living? Is that what I am now? I had one of those days the other day, and we just went from meeting to meeting to meeting, and then it was like 1:45, and Seth and Miana were at the gym training, and I think I just like got up and walked out. The meeting was still going on, and I got up and walked out, and I was like, I don't want to talk about socks anymore. Like I just like I need to be out in the gym doing anything else. Like tell me about your training or something. Just like distract me with lifting things, because I need to just get back to the reason. Like I'm still involved in lifting, right? I'm not just like cash flow analysts and shipping timelines for apparel and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so anyways, the biggest thing is definitely people, and just getting people you can trust. And, there have been times where we've wanted to try to bring in more people, but I'm so tentative. It's like Calgary Barbell is my blood, sweat, and tears. It's like everything that I've ever like built is kind of like wrapped up in this entity. So the idea that we might bring on the wrong person is like terrifying to me. So I really am cautious with who I bring into it, but the people that I've brought into it so far have enabled it to be so much more than it otherwise would have. So, yeah.
Are there certain aspects that you have that have seasonality to it that you have to lean into more so during different times of the year?
For sure. Yeah. Like the apparel program we have, that's one of the major things that we brought Chelsea on for. She worked for, a lot of other companies organizing and doing all this kind of stuff. And she was a client of mine and started doing some freelance work for us, a couple hours a week or whatever. And just recently started with us full time in the beginning of the year here. And, she's got it set up to the point where we have like scheduled launches, however many a quarter. And for that time leading up to that, we have to be a little more crunch time in the mode, like, figuring out, okay, we got to go over designs. We got to talk to designers. We got to, get samples and think about colorways and all this kind of stuff. And then it's like, we get all the stuff in, we got to count it. And like, we do all the fulfillment ourselves. Our office is like half storeroom. We just have shelves with boxes of apparel on it. And then for like, a week or so, we go in, we do our work day, and then we pack orders for like 3 or 4 hours afterwards or whatever. And then once that's gone, it's gone. You know what I mean? Like we're back to kind of business as usual. And then the next launch starts to happen and the whole cycle kind of goes over and over again. But yeah, absolutely. It's that idea of, like you said, balance is maybe not the best word, because it doesn't work like that. It's like the teeter-totter smashes into the bottom on one side, and then it inevitably needs to smash into the bottom on the other side. And it's just like, you just have to figure out what you're weighting it down with at any given time, because it's never going to be like, oh, everything is like perfectly in sync. Like,
oh, no.
For moments, maybe.
Yeah.
But definitely not for like any, extended period of time. But yeah.
If it's the apparel, what percentage of product, how do I say this, flops, like compared to the ones that do well, right? Because I don't think people don't talk about stuff like this.
Yeah.
At the end, it needs to be a net positive, right? Yeah. But sometimes that net positive isn't because everything that you have sold.
Yeah.
One of them sold enough to make it a net positive.
Yeah.
Because the goal is to sell out, right?
Yep.
So the quantity needs to be at a point that you can sell out, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily happen.
Yep.
So you end up with a lot of shit that you're trying to figure out where to give it away to later. Yep. But going back to what we were saying earlier, a lot more times than not, you can't figure it out, like, because things that you think are going to move don't.
Yeah.
Then other ones do. And so I'll just guess, is it over 50% that move?
Yeah. We're again, like pretty fortunate with that. And we've got, like I said, we got Chelsea on board now, and she's like, that's her forte.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So we have, from like when Dylan and I were still managing everything, we have a lot of, anybody listening, we have a lot of extra small sweat shorts.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of tank tops. So if anybody's interested in Calgary Barbell, extra small sweat shorts, it's buy one, get 4 free at this point. Like, but yeah, we have a couple like odd items like that have kind of sat around, but for the most part, and I think it's partly because we're, again, like a little bit trepidatious with our ordering.
Mm-hmm.
We don't order large quantities because we can't warehouse much,
mm-hmm.
and we fulfill and ship it all ourselves. So
mm-hmm.
for now, it's like, it's kind of constrained by that. So the stuff that we get does tend to just kind of go.
Yeah. So if I tell people who are interested in your apparel, if it's black, buy it fast. That's true.
Yeah, that is true for sure.
I'm paranoid to order anything that's not black anymore. It's like, fuck that.
Yeah.
It's red, no. Orange, no.
Yeah. We had some creamsicle tank tops from like 2014. I think we still have 1 or 2. Yeah. Just like weird colorways that we thought would be awesome for some reason. But
now with the content and YouTube, because that site started, when did that start? It started before 2014, right?
When did we start YouTube?
The YouTube?
2014?
2014, yeah.
2014.
So there's obviously, with content, there's themes, there's iterations, there's things that come and there's things that go. I think that your best video is the short documentary that you have. I believe, well, I think it's the highest viewed, right?
One of the
highest viewed.
Yeah.
That's there. Then there's concepts that you'll try, that come and go.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any, because I've been down the same road, are there any concepts that you started and you held on for too long? Because I'm pretty fast now. Like if a concept's not working, it's like, fuck this, I'm not doing it anymore.
Right.
I'm probably don't give things a long enough time period than what it used to be. But sometimes, have you run into those things?
Oh yeah. I think we did 260 or so episodes of Form Check Friday.
Oh yeah.
And for a while there, 4 years in, they started blowing up out of nowhere. We were getting 200,000 views on them. Like, it was going crazy. And then it just fell back off again. So we did them for long enough that they got, like, a couple of them got super popular, and then it fell off, and we kept going and kept going and kept going, and never. So I think it was just, that's one of those things with content, is sometimes you make stuff and it's just chaos. You like put it out in the void, and maybe it goes insane, or maybe you put a ton of work into it and you think it's going to be the next big best thing. Like this, we put so much effort in the channel, the channel's going to blow up, people are going to love this, and then it just flops.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that stuff is so hard to predict. And it's like, well, was it the thumbnail? Did we title it wrong? Is it too long? Is it too short? Should we monetize it? Should we demonetize it so we can use better music? Should we? And it's just like, it's constant reiteration. So yeah, we've definitely held on to things too long. We've tried to incorporate a lot of other stuff that we've seen, and sometimes it works well and sometimes it really doesn't. And YouTube's just like a very unpredictable place, I think.
What metrics do you use to track the success of what it is?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it depends on what your definition of success is, right? Because we had a video just recently that we did, this like squat transformation video. It was a short, like 40-second video or whatever. And we used some song that was like trending on TikTok, and Dylan put my third squat from my first meet and my third squat from Worlds. And it was, I think, like 197 or 200 kilos to 317. And it was 10 years of progress, squat transformation. It's got over 100 million views. And it just like, no idea. We did a deadlift one 6 months before that. Didn't do the same. And like, I don't know, is that success? Because we've grown a lot.
Well, that is right. Because,
to an extent, yeah. We've grown a lot in subscribers because of that video, but we haven't necessarily noticed as big an uptick in people like engaging with our stuff now. So it's interesting to see sometimes like these metrics and numbers. It's like, okay, well, this video blew up and we gained a whole bunch of new subscribers. But the stuff that we are like passionate and stoked about, like the vlogs and the educational stuff, like they're not getting the same boost you would think from that big influx of people. So like, where's the disconnect? You know what I mean? So there are forms of success that are metrics based, and like we sometimes hit the nail on the head there. But I think the actual success of like content is going to be people who like want to come back for more. People who understand and are into what you're talking about and like what your brand or whatever, like who the people are that are involved in it, like the people that'll comment and come to a live stream or come up and say hi when they meet you. Like the more of those people who like really fuck with you, that to me is success. The more people who you can like actually impact and like, have them like want to support you.
Yeah.
Not just like think they should because they got free stuff or free like information, but like who were so positively affected by what you did and put out there that they now like want to follow what you've got coming next and are like excited for it. So I think that to me is like, that's the pool of people that I want to like bring in and have as like an audience, I guess. Yeah.
The way that I look at it is a little bit differently because yes, the message matters, right? It's the whole company's based around, live, learn, pass on education, content, stuff like that. But somebody has to pay for the content. Yeah. Right. That's kind of like a lost thing that that most people don't really understand. Yeah. If you're putting content out, then there's a cost to the content, like the apparel, there's a cost of goods sold. You got to, create it, pay for it to be created. So X piece of content cost what amount of money, just to be able to put it out there. And then what is the ROI on that content? And that's multiple faceted if it's YouTube, right? Because you're going to have the ad revenue that can play into that. Yeah. But you'll have conversions of sales, if there's a link in there that tracks back. But then there's kind of what you can't track. How many people saw it that actually purchased something from you, or how many is that an anchor for long-term value of a customer? People stay customers because of that. So there's a certain percentage that's not really trackable, but there's enough trackable to determine, is this content stream working? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Because and it's not so much it's not all those, because you can have a video that doesn't do really well, but then converts and you get 10 clients or whatever it's going to be. That's a success video for different reasons than if it's views, right? Because people get lost in followers, I think, where if somebody was to contract you or to have you go to university to speak on somebody on program design, and you're in a classroom of 50 people and you're speaking about program design, you're like, fuck, man, this is pretty cool. Yeah. There's 50 people that give a fuck about what I'm talking about right now. Yeah. But now if I said you have 50 followers on Instagram, you're like, dude, that sucks. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Absolutely. So it's the perspective of what it is. Like, who would actually be more engaging, the 50 people in a classroom or now what if that classroom wasn't 50 people? What if you could speak in an arena with 110,000 people and you just got 2 minutes, or like your 1 minute podcast, you got 1 minute, right? To be able to hit those 100,000 people. Yeah. Guaranteed none of them are going to buy shit from you. None of them are going to support you. Yeah, you got that 1 minute.
Quick timeline.
Yeah. Yeah. So who's more important, the 50 or the 100,000? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's where the followers and stuff like that get really fucking tricky. Yeah. And YouTube subscribers are a weird one because do more subscribers actually create more ad revenue? I don't fucking know. I don't think anybody knows. I don't think it can hurt. So those people that are listening should subscribe to our YouTube channel because like it's crazy with the podcast. Like 80% of the people who watch the podcast on YouTube don't subscribe. Oh, it's crazy high. And it's like, why?
It's just one little click.
It's one click. It's not that fucking hard. Just click. But anyhow, that's why I asked that, because I'm very interested in how other people look at those metrics, because it can get out of hand. You know, you can dump so much money, you know, into YouTube and all these different resources, especially if you're hiring contractors and all this other kind of stuff, where maybe the traction builds and the followers build, but you're now $200,000 in debt because none of it actually transferred over. Yeah. Where some other people just post shit with no thumbnails and pop off. Yeah. Like,
yeah. So I think one of the things that I've started, and Dylan and I talk about this like ad nauseum, like this is a constant ongoing conversation. But one of the things I think is that you kind of have to look at it like training, right? And if you look at your training and you look at every little session and you're like, oh, good one, bad one, good one, bad one, and you get really emotionally invested in this like kind of small slice of it, I think it can be really misleading. Whereas I think like training, you kind of have to zoom out, and when you're in it and when you're making it day to day, probably not best to think about like all of the like clicks algorithm kind of stuff, but every so often like zoom out and review a little bit, you know what I mean? And be like, okay, what's working, what's not, where should we put more effort, you know, and you do all that kind of analysis at like a time. And then you use that to like set a direction for it so that you're not just like overwhelmed and consumed. Because we've been there before too, like in the moment of making the content, we're like, oh, well, should we do it in this style because this guy's having success with that? Or, you know, should we do it like that style we did the one time? And then just like overcome and overwhelmed by so many different ways of trying to present even the same information. Should be long or short or whatever. You know, I think going in with like the game plan and having that plan built around, you know, a longer look at your, like at your last block, right? You do a block review, you look at your last block, you decide how you're going to do the next block. And then, you know, you got to monitor stuff along the way and make sure that maybe things are going the right way. But I think it's super easy to get lost in the sauce when you start going down the like YouTube, like creator studio and all the metrics and stuff, and you know, average, you know, your viewers drop off at this time, so then you're trying to make like the outros faster and stuff like it. There's so much to like overanalyze.
It's what I've done with social media and just any marketing, let's just put it that way. So if it's any marketing channel, I'll start with tracking as many metrics as I possibly can on my own, you know, so I'll transfer it from there to a spreadsheet. Yep. And then you can see, because with content, I'll use it as an example, they're all in one spreadsheet. I can see correlations, and some of them I'm sure are just spurious, you know, but it happens, you know, where this impacts this. Why? I can't fucking tell you.
I wish I could tell
you. I have 5 years to show you it does. I don't know why, but it does. Yeah. And then over a period of time, you find that you can trim. You know, it's, say if you train conjugate, you realistically, you could have 5,000 metrics that you're tracking. Yeah. You know, 400 max effort exercises, and the spreadsheet's just wild. Where over a period of time, you can condense that to like, here's 3 movements that I know if they go up, the bench goes up. So I've always started tracking as many things as I could, but then trying to figure out what are those 3. Yeah. Then I just track those. Or optimally, if there's just like 1 or 2, because that way, then if that's off, you can always go to the platform. Yeah. Okay. Say this is off. This is fucked up. Why is it fucked up? Yeah. Don't know. Now you go into fucking, well, he goes into the Google studio more than I do. Right. Then you go into the studio and you're like, what could be contributing to this being fucked up? Right. Because social media as a whole is more than just the YouTube. It plays into the Instagram, and all of it's got to play into clicks back to your site, you know, all these other type of things but you can get lost in the weeds, man. Oh yeah. Like I'm afraid sometimes if there's like threads or whatever, like, fuck, do I want to add this to the spreadsheet? You're like, what the fuck, you know? Because I know how it starts, man. It starts like this many variables, then it gets down to like that. And then sometimes it's like, it didn't even help. Yeah. You know, and it's where I think a lot of people get lost is you got to have metrics that directly carry over to what you want to personally see improve. It could be hits to your site. It could be sales. It could be clients. It could just be that you want to be more popular. I mean, that's some people, they just want to be more popular. And don't lose sight of that, because you'll start seeing other people's stuff and then want to do what they're doing, or see the Instagram reel for 45 seconds on how to get more YouTube followers. Like it's a slide thing or whatever it is. And you're saving all 9 slides. Like, I need to do all this. Then you're like, well, then you go look at the guy's YouTube. Mm-hmm. Like, oh fuck, he's got 12 followers. Yeah. If this really worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to use it up on myself,
Exactly. Yeah. No, God, I can tell all kinds of stories. If you haven't had it yet, you'll have people reaching out that'll want to do marketing for you. Yeah. Those are some fun people to talk to.
Yeah. We've had that. But yeah, I mean, sometimes Dylan will come in and be like, man, I was in the Matrix. I know what we need to do. And then we'll, have a direction that we'll try to run with, or a type of thumbnail or format or whatever. And we'll try it out. And again, it's just like, it's so much like training. Even when you said you're kind of like tracking those 3 things, if they're going the right direction, then, overall it's going the right direction. I think, there's so many correlations on that level that you can pull out from trying to see how these things perform. And I guess the other like kind of thing that shakes things up is like you said, like a new platform or something, and even big changes in the existing ones. Because I think one of the things we noticed with YouTube was that short form content is like using the YouTube shorts, and like the 1 minute stuff is massive. That probably drives more of our engagement and traffic and stuff now than anything else. So it's been an interesting challenge to try to take a lot of these topics that, I'm super passionate about. And obviously, we can sit here and bullshit on training for 4.5 hours or whatever, but to take some of this stuff and be like, okay, I want to present this like complex, nuanced thing about how, coaches use models in their head of what technique should look like, but then individualize it and like coming up with these kind of big ideas and being like, okay, how do I deliver this in a minute? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's like, you just don't, because that's not going to work. Yeah. And then other times you have to leave out nuance, and you leave yourself open to people being like, oh yeah, you said, and it's like, well,
that's more
use
engagement,
your brain,
though.
You know what I mean? That's true. That's true.
Still more engagement. Like, that's who gives a shit?
That is actually one of the things I've started using as a metric of success, is whether or not we get some like really ignorant comments on there. Mm-hmm. Because if it's gone to somebody who like either doesn't understand powerlifting, or like whatever, like is so far from the space that they think what you're doing is so stupid, they're going to go into the comments and be like, this guy actually chose to look like this or something. It's like, well, our shit's getting to like new people now.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because now you're on the fringe.
That's how I've turned it in my head to be like, no, this person making fun of me ruthlessly is a positive thing.
No, it is. I mean, it's just that's a kind of a business thing. As a business grows and expands, we're not to that point with apparel, but apparel will be an example. There's a certain percentage of returns that determine that you're actually outside, you're tapping people outside of what your basic demographic is. Yeah. So it's good, because that's in there. But I don't know what that number is. I haven't been in that number, but the content it would be the same way. Yeah. As long as it is still hitting your demographic, which sometimes I wonder if it does or not, because like how can all the comments be these stupid people, but not any of them are like,
if they're all stupid people, then maybe
well, the reality is people don't leave good comments. That's the fact, right?
People like it if they like it, and they comment if they don't.
Well, you've been online for a long time, and this is something I really, really try to push to newer people that are online, is if all you've ever done is content online, then you have this big misconception that what you do doesn't make a difference, because 90% of what you're going to see is going to be negative. Most of your DMs are going to be bad. There's not going to be a lot of attaboys. I really like, now sometimes there will be, right? But it's far more than if you trained a group of athletes in a gym somewhere. Wendler pointed this out to me when he left the online space and started training the ball players. Yeah. It's like, this is amazing. I'm being told thank you every day. It's like this is complete opposite. Like 90%, 95% is all good. We're online. It's like 90% is bad. And if that was the realization, well, people don't leave good comments. Mm-hmm. They don't. It's not like, hey, good job. It's very rare for somebody to do that, because the silent majority typically are silent for a reason.
Yeah.
Because they just want to absorb the content.
Yeah.
So then you got to look like, what was the views? You know, how many people actually saw this, and then just be narcissistic and just say, okay, all those people loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know, they would give 5 stars, right? So then it's like these 20 people.
Yeah.
There are 20 out of 7,000.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
know,
it's
but,
not a bad ratio.
But I think the sooner people can realize that are online, the easier it's going to be for them to accept bad comments, poor comments, because outside of like the emoji blog ones that just fuck up the whole thread, you know, you got to delete those.
Yeah.
Then it's engagement.
Yeah.
It's like, good. Be an asshole. Actually be a huge asshole. Be such an asshole that somebody else is going to come in and tell you that you're an asshole. Because now I got 2 comments.
The old comment wars. Yeah.
Yes. That's the greatest. Have you ever had that where there's a comment war going on and then somebody will come in and just like go over the top, like just make it like the worst comment ever.
Yeah.
And then everybody flips. Then it becomes like a good thread.
And it goes back to being positive.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know if I've ever seen that kind of.
No, I used to have that all in one before the
horseshoe theory kind of.
Oh
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Before the social media was that, it was just forums.
Yeah.
You know, there'd be forums about the company, just be like, oh fuck, this is hard to read. Like wham, wham, wham. Then somebody would say something just off the wall. And then these people would be like, come on, man, it ain't that fucking bad. They're like, fuck you. You know, and then all of a sudden it's like, yes, you know, so I kept waiting for that tipping point.
Yeah.
It's like, it's getting bad, but it's not bad enough.
Yeah. Not bad enough to come back.
It's gotta be a little worse.
Yeah.
Like, there it is. And they're like, boom, yes.
Yeah.
And that was the greatest. But people are, I believe they're oversensitive.
Yeah.
You know, of what's going on out there with that, or they don't get any comments at all.
Yeah.
You know, they get upset about that. And either way, it's still being seen.
Yeah, it can be discouraging for sure.
Yeah. But if it's a business, going back to what I was saying, what's the metric? You know, what's your squat, bench, and deadlift?
Yeah.
What's
exactly.
the main metric, man?
Yeah.
Because you get lost in the weeds with all that other kind of shit. Your main metric will drop. You know, if all you do is accessory work, but never do the main training work that you need to do to get your big lifts to go up, it ain't going up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what happens.
Right?
Yeah. They start dealing with all this accessory shit and losing sight of what actually carries over to it. I see this all the time.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. They're like, fuck, what do I do now? Well, how about do what you were doing? Yeah. You know, be yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes that can change though, right? Like sometimes just the appetite for things is different, and there's a different generation, I think, now consuming content on different platforms. And yeah, it's interesting sometimes to see and to try to think about, you know, the things that popped off and were you know, big views and big engagement and that kind of stuff previously that might not be now, and the stuff that is now might not have been then. And you know, there's definite changes in the trends. So I think sometimes, you know, as much as you should do the things that got you there, I think there's also a lot of value in trying to like just analyze everything you can that's doing well and try to figure out why. You know what I mean? Try to figure out like why Sam Sulek vlogs that are 2 hours long and are just kind of like him just being himself and chatting are like exploding. Like why is everyone and their mom watching these vlogs? Because a lot of people could put out those vlogs and they wouldn't. You know what I mean? You could have 50 people try to recreate that vlog format and it wouldn't. So what is it about him? You know what I mean? And plenty of other content creators, you know, like Jeff Nippard is another guy who comes up a lot, and he does a lot of like science explained stuff. You familiar with Jeff? Yeah. So, you know, and I think again, like a lot of people could be making these very science driven videos, but like, what is it about that? What way is he doing it that like turns it into this thing that's a head and shoulders beyond what, you know, what other people might do with that same format or same video style?
Yeah, I think they fill a void,
training.
You know, where with Sam, it's interesting because I mean, there's no thumbnails. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just like, whoa, this is completely against like everything that everybody's being told. But I think it's bigger than that, because there's authenticity, which people talk about. It's very authentic. The one thing that does kind of make me laugh just a little bit about it, and I like his stuff, I do, and I'll continue with kind of where I think, the popularities, some of it's coming from is, they'll say he's a throwback, like the old school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is he really though? Because he's walking in with a tripod with this giant Canon fucking camera on it, and filming every single set, and then stripping down and posing afterward. Is that the throwback?
I honestly don't know.
There weren't people like filming their shit when I went in to train.
Yeah.
Now, is this train? So yes, the training and stuff is, but the other thing that's interesting there is now his training, like I said, it is, but if you're the outsider in that gym looking at the dude, like I like to do this a lot of times, like, cause people are like walking down the street with selfie stips.
Yep.
What if you're in the car watching this person across the street? You're laughing your ass off.
You might
like,
look at this, filming them.
Like, yeah. You're like, look at this. Well, there's there's a Instagram page called Influencers in the Wild, which is kind of like that kind of stuff. And I look at it that way. Like I can't not look at it that way. So if I see like somebody's running, like, oh God, the motivational guy that runs all the time.
I don't know.
I should know this. Fucking the SEAL guy.
Oh, Goggins.
Like
okay.
Somebody's like driving next to him, like filming him running. Like, if I was watching that, I'm laughing my ass off.
I would be too.
I am laughing my ass off, right? So when I see those things for some dumb fucking reason, that's what I look at. Like, how's this being produced?
I think that's an interesting
thing. It makes me laugh. It really does. But it's not what that content is. But with Sam stuff, the other thing I think people miss there is he's still got to edit. Now, granted, it's a shoot edit. I mean, there's not a whole lot of editing, I'm sure. It's just kind of, but he's still got to upload it. I mean, it's an hour video. It's got to upload to YouTube. That doesn't happen. He's putting a lot of time into this.
Yeah.
So he is the content creator. So I think they just see that and they're like, oh, that's like a window into his time, but they don't see that there's a lot of work that he's doing to be able to do that. Where I think a lot of the appeal is I think it's a start of a little bit of a pushback where, and you kind of touched on it earlier, just with your own training, you do this long enough. Like when you're in college and training, you just fucking love to train. Like fuck everything else. I'm just fucking training. Like I'll skip the class to go train.
Yep.
But I'm fucking training. I love this shit.
Do it. Yeah.
Then the longer you do it, you have other responsibilities. Everything's come in there. And so it's still a high priority, but it's not as fun as what it was. Right. So anybody that's been doing this a long time that watches his stuff, you're thinking back, man, I remember when it was like that. When I would go into the gym and you're just attracted to that, right? Because it reminds you of, this is why I do this. I love this shit. He loves this shit. So that's got an appeal to people that are way older than what he is.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is because it's blowing up. I mean, what's he got, like 1.2 million followers or something now? Something like that. That's not just the 23-year-olds and under.
No. Right.
So that's everybody. And it's a good thing because I love to see people being reminded of, you got into this because you love to do it. There's nuance, man. The longer you do it, the more injured you get, the stronger you get. There's meats, there's nuance. It's a frustrating because the gains aren't coming like they used to, nor should they. You're breaking world records. Like it doesn't work like that. Right. But it becomes a different thing. So it's a reminder. He's a huge reminder. And for that, I think, oh my, this is a cool ass thing. Give it a month. There's going to be 20 other people trying to do exactly what he's doing. And it won't work because it was the right time, the right message, the right place. Where I think like Nippard with the science stuff, there probably was a gap. Right. And then the right time, right place, right message. Then becomes the challenge of how do they keep it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And, it's his is a vlog. I mean, he can keep it as long as he keeps vlogging. I mean, it's just going to keep rolling. But it is the thumbnails and shit are what fucked me up with that. Right. Because I thought that was important. Like I thought the titles were important.
I mean, that's the beauty of it, is it just goes against everything, right?
Yeah,
I think that's part of what people love, is that it's super successful, but it seems like it's so against the grain of this, like this polished and produced kind of, above the surface kind of thing that a lot of people have done and has been presented as like fitness content for so long. And I think, the fact that he's just kind of like,
I love it. I love it.
On the edges and stuff, I think really gets people going.
I love it because it is authentic. I said something about that before. It was authentic. We did Joey, I think I talked to him about that. We did that and I said it was authentic. And I'm like, what's he supposed to be, fake? I mean, people are like, this is the funniest thing about YouTube is people do reaction videos on him. And the people that do the reaction videos are actually in character mode themselves, right? So they're not their own authentic self when they're doing the reaction videos, right? Because some of these people I've met, that's not them. They have their camera, and that's okay. Yeah. They have their camera character, then they have their real life, and that's fine. But you're not authentic, you know, complaining about somebody else who's authentic. You know, it's odd to me. You know, like, you can't say that while you're fake as fuck yourself. You know, it's
I mean, you could.
You know, it's interesting. And I think my response to Joey was when it really started popping off, it's like, so what's the alternative? What he's doing? Being fake? Yeah. You know, so like he should like wake up in the morning and eat fucking 10 egg whites and, you know, Ezekiel toast and, you know, all the shit
by the book.
Yeah, by the book that everybody thinks that he should do. So he should just fake that. That would be better. You know,
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying? But Joey had an interesting point with him as well, because he said if he was a power lifter or a strongman, nobody would give a fuck. They wouldn't care about what he was eating. Okay. Like they wouldn't give a shit that he was eating cereal. Yeah. You know, or cinnamon toast or whatever it is. Yeah. They wouldn't care.
I think probably it would be harder in general for him to do what he did if he was a strength athlete versus being in the bodybuilding world, because it's so visual, because it's so like, I don't know, like you can watch somebody lift a weight and you're like, I don't know how much that is, whatever. I guess it looks kind of heavy. But unless you're like, you know, strongman may be a little more accessible still, but bodybuilding is like everybody has a body. You know what I mean? Like everybody has seen muscles. And when you see somebody that's like huge and shredded, you're like, what? You know what I mean? Like that makes you double take. But you can see like a giant bar loaded up to the nines, you know what I mean? And it's still kind of like, meh, for a lot of people. But I think for whatever reason, bodybuilding has like a much wider appeal with a lot of that stuff.
It's tough, you know, because I tried to do some crossover stuff with John when he was alive, and if you're in, I don't want to say it's not possible. It just hasn't been done yet. Like if you're in the strength world, it's hard to crack into that world. It really is. It's like two different mindsets, which is weird to me. But because
you're talking like as an athlete trying to go from one sport to another?
Well, just as a creator, right? So if you got all this strength content, then you start putting hypertrophy content out. And by our nature, to us, that's a block. You know, to them, that's the whole thing. You know, so it's a weird message for people who aren't into the strength world to understand. Right. Where we're trying to create hypertrophy in a shorter period of time, which is actually a more complicated task, you know, to be able to do, but we don't have this big window, you know, to be able to, and to be completely honest, we don't need it to the same degree. Yeah. You know, it's a different thing. As a strength athlete, I wish more people were into strength than they were vanity, but I've been trying to change that, you know, because everybody can do that. Well, I guess everybody can do the other too. Yeah. But everybody can do that. And to me, for me personally, it's always been more rewarding to have that meet like you had, you know, to lift that PR. You're like, fuck, I didn't think I was able to do that. Yeah. The rewards are more frequent than when I try to do bodybuilding type. I don't know if you ever try to do any type of bodybuilding training.
Not real bodybuilding. Like I do some bodybuilding style training, but nothing that approximates like what would go into a prep or any of that kind of stuff. I don't know if I got what it takes for it. I might, but
have you ever tried to venture out of the training parameters that you live in, which is the higher frequency model?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think like, especially over the last, I mean, probably since that kind of, I told you about that block where you said it was more like a peaking block, right? Probably since then, I've realized that I can't do the frequency I used to. You know what I mean? I might be a little higher frequency again right now, but that's because it's like I can high bar squat 15% of my 1RM, you know what I mean? So I can have some frequency there, but for the most part, my actual training has come down substantially in frequency and volume over the past probably 4 or 5 years.
What about movements outside of I hesitate on comp movement because I got to define what that is for outside of a couple. So let's say to me, a competition lift is when you compete. You know, so you got to walk it out. You're being judged. You put it back. It's a single with a walkout and rack command. And so a double to me is already one deviation away from a competition lift. So it's with a lot of the higher frequency, you guys really don't move much more than say like 3 deviations away, like a close grip, maybe a bench press with chains and stuff like that. Where have you moved further away than that?
Yeah, again, kind of as a necessity. Throughout the course of like figuring out injury stuff, definitely have been pushing more into, you know, again, like single leg stuff, things like leg extensions and training my biceps, which was never a thing for 10 years. And doing a lot more like isolation work and that kind of stuff. I think especially knowing how healthy and viable it is for me to have kind of like a time where I peak. I know that up to that time, if I just like can stay healthy and put in training that is productive and meaningful, and whether that's super specific or not, I think sometimes it's really good for me to take a step back from all the specificity and you know, high frequency, high volume kind of stuff, and do things that are a little more different and a little more out there, and knowing how quickly I can get back into like sport form, into you know, comp form. I think I'm way more likely and liable and easy, you know, it's easier to take a step back from that stuff.
Well, those things, you know, those are back end movements, right? So the front end movements are what I'm talking about. So say, well, now your knee's fucked up. So your front end movement, do you still just do technique work with say 135 on the squat, or there's just no squat at all, or is there a belt squat? Is the workload being maintained to some degree?
Yes, now it is. Now that I'm able to move again, you know, I'm replicating set and rep schemes that we're using on my bench press right now in slightly non-comp movements. So I'm doing a high bar squat and a conventional deadlift instead of a low bar squat and a sumo deadlift. Yeah, and I'm going to scale those up to, you know, getting somewhere close to actual RPEs or actual work, actual training. But for right now, it's just, okay, I just reintroduced these movements, you know, a week ago. So yeah, I did 70 kilos last week. I'm going to try and go 120 this week. And hopefully I can continue to take some nice big jumps on those. And the plan is to be, you know, back to quote unquote real training, using the competition movements at least once a week, and, you know, actual intensity and volume and stuff by about January. But yeah, I mean, the front end movements have again, like, had to change, you know what I mean? Like my front end movement for a while there, I would put on my knee sleeves and I would get geared up like I was going to squat single, and I would do goblet squats, and I would do sets of 20, and those were my squat. I would do my warm-ups, and I would treat those like those were the movement for the day, because that was the only way I was getting back to the point where I was doing low bar single. So, you know, changing that out, again, was a necessity at the time, but the more that I kind of reflect on that time I spent deviated further, the more I think like that's a pretty good thing to do sometimes, I think. And had we maybe had that foresight, or had I had this experience, you know, I probably could have utilized that previously. Yeah. And avoided times where I tried to stay on track with like pushing things in this very kind of, you know, narrow band in terms of specificity movements and that kind of stuff. Probably could have deviated a lot further out of that, enjoyed way more success, progress, and momentum, and then been able to come back smoother to be, you know, back in sport mode, sport condition.
I mean, post meet, it really shouldn't matter, right? Because Mike works big on the time to peak, right? So I'm sure you know what your time to peak is. Yeah. So as long as you're at your base and you know what that time to peak is, if you're 30 weeks out, does it really matter what those front end movements are at week 30, 29, 28, 27.
Yeah, that far out, probably not.
Probably doesn't.
Yeah.
As long as you have enough time to transition,
to
be able to go into that, where most, from what I've seen, most of the worst injuries that I've seen happen 6 weeks after a meet, right? And it's for various reasons. For tested lifters, it's because they're trying to program off a comp peak.
Yep.
Which isn't really a training max. It's a comp max.
Seen that mistake.
Right?
Made that mistake.
It's an inflated max, but it's purposely inflated.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do.
You're like, well, I'm this strong now, so if I would have done volume with 220, well, now I can do it with 240. So like, we're gonna bump up because I'm stronger now.
Yeah.
And we're gonna do volume like way more aggressive because we made so much progress last block. And it's a trap.
Oh, it is. It is. With the geared lifters, it's because they just lower dose, and then it's the same type of thing. So it's interesting how, if it's tested or not tested, the pitfalls are always kind of the same.
Similar, yeah.
Because it's still recovery. It's just how it's recovery based, and it's usually training periodization that gets whacked sometimes. But sometimes you don't learn till you fuck it up.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to fuck it up a couple times.
Yeah. Are there other things outside of that it took you a couple times to figure out?
My deadlift. The last couple times I've come back from my knee, I get into this habit of trying to brace like I did when I was equipped. And I try to go into that like really kind of low back extension, because that worked for me really well when I was at 105, and specifically when I was equipped. So I have this like thing in the back of my head where I keep wanting to do that. And I keep getting halfway through a prep. This happened the last 2 preps. I get halfway through the prep and I like miss something that should be an opener. And I'm just left shaking my head like, what the fuck just happened? And then, inevitably I realize that I can't brace like that. I'm a 120. I don't fit the same way around a barbell, and I have to like embrace a little bit of flexion and just do more work with my lats and whatever. And then I'll salvage the prep. I'll get like 1 or 2 good deadlifts, and then it's time to compete. And I did that the last 2 preps, and my deadlift hasn't shown up in the way that I had hoped or wanted it to for those 2 preps. And I think in large part because of that. I mean, that's a super specific example, but yeah, I mean, still, there's always more things to improve on. There are more things to like catch yourself doing, or to try to break the habits around, or, that's another thing that I think is just so constantly engaging about powerlifting, is there's always progress to be made,
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's nuance that's that other side of the sword. When we're talking about Sam, that's the other side. You can get so caught, and you get strong enough, you have to get caught up in the nuance, because that's the only way you're going to put 5 pounds on something.
Yeah.
On the other side of that blade, you can't get caught up in the nuance, because you're going to do so at the expense of the low hanging fruit that's going to make you stronger. Yeah. Which is show up, eat more.
The basics, right?
The basic stuff where some people will fuck around way too much on technicalities of certain things, where just keep adding weight till you can squat 315.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how that ebbs and flows, of that, when you've been in the sport for a decade. So to go back to that, and the sport's change, the sport always changes, by the way. So I want to put that out there. People don't, I've seen so many changes in the sport. It's ridiculous. So what are the changes that you've seen over the past decade?
So, I mean, I think obviously the participation, like I happened to get in at a time where maybe it's just where I was in the world. I don't know, but it just seems like such a small, tiny little fringe thing. You know what I mean? Like I remember doing Western Canadian Championships, and it was like a 14 lifter meet at like gym in the basement of a mall. And I had done like 1 competition before. There was no qualifying total. I just like signed up, and I was at Western Championships. And now it's like every year they're pushing the qualifying totals up and up and up and up, because they have too many people signing up. Like too many people are too strong. You know what I mean? Like that's not a problem that was happening when I started powerlifting. I think that the standard is going through the roof. You know, I remember being part of that for a bit too. I remember watching guys. I watched a guy, he was 120 and he squatted 600 pounds for the first, for whatever, in a meet. And I remember him just like going off and me watching and just being like, oh my God, like this guy's such a badass. That is insane. And then I remember going on to compete against that guy and beat him, and to squat more and to squat more and to squat more. And now it's like, if you're not squatting 600 pounds and you're an 83, like you're not competitive at the top level.
Mm-hmm.
Or 74 even. Like it's crazy to see just how far like the bar has risen in terms of the standard, at least for the highest level of competition. And I imagine there's got to be some trickle down, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you can go get beat at a local meet lifting numbers that would have won you national championships 10 years ago. It's wild and it's cool, and I think it's awesome in some ways and frustrating in others because I'm still trying to hang out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think overall it's good for the sport, and yeah, I think just seeing more people stoked on it is always good.
Where would you like to see it continue? Where would you like to see it go?
It's a good question. I think I'd like to see more of like a unified front in a lot of cases. I'd like to see a lot of maybe some like federations, come together and become a bigger federation instead of always fracturing and splitting apart and drama and all that kind of stuff. I'd like to see more lifters in positions of power within the organizations. I think, and I don't know enough to make like broad sweeping statements, but I think there's going to be a time soon where there's going to be kind of a changing of the guard for a lot of the organizations and a lot of the heads of the organizations. And I think when that happens is going to be a really good thing, because I think hopefully it's going to be a lot of people who have come up lifting and been involved in lifting and done lifting and trained. And they're going to be the ones that are in charge of policy and implementing change and that kind of stuff. So I'd like to see things get to the point where lifters, can make money being a lifter. And not making a business around lifting and selling apparel and blah, 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 but like the truly talented, you know what I mean? Like those absolute genetic freaks at the top of the top of the top, at the very least, you know what I mean? Like they're the LeBron Jameses of powerlift. Like at least those lifters, I think that'd be dope to see them get paid to do it, because then you just get to see how far they can push it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If they don't have all that other stuff that they have to take care of, they don't have all that training brain taken up thinking about their clients' programming and that kind of stuff. And that's not a reference to me, because I don't think I was
but you're not
that
no,
person.
It's a lie.
But I think that there are those lifters out there, and I just want to see like what people can do.
There's a negative to that side too. I mean, you give a fuck about your clients. A lot of the people that I know give a fuck about their clients too, but I'd be remiss to say that there's not a lot of top lifters out there that are taking on clients just to pay for their own sport cost, their own expenses, their drugs, whatever it is. Right. That's the only reason they have them. This is it. They don't give a fuck about it. Some don't even, they'll just take the money and just rip people off. It's so that if they could make enough money to not have to do that, then that
better for everyone. Really.
I don't know. They probably still would do it because they're shitty people. But I mean, shitty people are shitty people. So, but I think that with what you're saying, a lot of that is already happening
in motion. Yeah,
it's already in motion. The only one that I don't know is in motion is because there's always been a changing of the guard, the people that work into those positions. And for the most part, they've always been lifters or former lifters that work into those positions. But at some point in time, those people forget what it was like to be a lifter.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's more that than they were never lifters. But it seems like people grow disconnected.
Yeah, it's like there needs to be a seat at the table that's not a very busy seat, that are actually people who are still competing.
Yeah.
Because you can't be because it can't take your time. You know what I'm saying? You just need to be like, what's going on? Here's my insight. Leave me the fuck alone. Let me go train.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get caught up in the politics of all the bullshit, because that happens in there.
Yeah.
But I've seen it happen because most of the new federations or whatever they are, most of them start because a lifter gets pissed off because of what happens in a certain federation. They leave, start their own, and then maybe they fix that problem, but then they got 12 other problems that they didn't know existed in the other federation that were actually taken care of and mitigated because of that, and then just rolls and rolls and rolls. But the lifters, as I said earlier, have more power than they think. You know, and I think we're kind of seeing it on the untested raw side, where it really doesn't, from what I've seen, it really doesn't matter what federation it is. You know, the guys that want to compete against each other, the top guys, and they do want to compete against each other. When I came up, there were a lot of people that did not want to compete against each other and would purposely go to different federations so they didn't have to do that. That doesn't happen. Actually, I don't see that happening really anywhere anymore. So that's a good thing, you know, because then there's always, well, I could have done, you know, that bullshit. But they've seemed to migrate before the crash of whatever popular meet there was. Because there'd be a popular meet, say they're paying or whatever it is. I asked John Hack about this, like, how in the fuck do you do this? Because you seem to get out and move to the next meet, the meet right before it went downhill. How does this happen? And I don't know. I don't even think he knew he was aware of it, but it happens. And I think it's because they all communicate with each other. Like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are they going to do? And then they kind of go that route. So it's kind of happening there, but there's less political affiliation on the non-tested side. The federations really don't matter. On the tested side,
go from one to the other and do this meet and that meet, and you're not, you know.
Well, there's more. God, I hate to say this. There's more federations to jump to, right? Now on the tested side, there's not, or there's two, right? Three maybe, you know, but two real big ones that the IPF and whatever the powerlifting, whatever the USAPL.
Oh yeah, USAPL worldwide.
Yeah, so there's, you know, those, but that fracturing kind of sucks, you know, with what that was. So the lifters will, like I said, the lifters will determine how that all plays out. But it'd be interesting to see what I see more of now. And I think when you're talking about the unification, I don't think we need to see the unification of federations against federations or that would be cool though. I don't know how it would fucking work, but it would definitely be cool. The unification needs to be, and I see this more now than probably any time except for when I first came in, because there are fewer federations. The top lifters communicating with top lifters in different federations. You know, so, you know, top raw guys training with and communicating with multiply guys or single ply guys and raw guys. And there's more friendships and correspondence across different disciplines in the sport, which is good because it just needs to be more broadcasted so people see it. Because the internet reality is that's not how it works. Like, fuck these guys, fuck these guys. But even that's being stifled, like it's being killed. Because once that really, really begins to solidify and become more of a constant voice, then I think, because there's power in numbers, right? So the tested people and the non-dug, they understand the different you understand that these are different sports, right? They're different disciplines of the sport. Nobody wants to see the other person get fucked.
No.
Like this group will hate this group and this group will hate this group, or drama. So they'll create drama amongst all that until somebody over here says, you know what, all powerlifters suck. Then they're all like, no, wait, wait a fucking minute. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, no, this is our family shit. Fuck you. You know, but when that pulls together even more, which is, I'm seeing it happening, when that pulls together more, and then you'll see concepts of certain things in one federation start to happen in another one, where I do think that we'll start to see judging panels go across more federations. Right. Because first off, it's a cool idea.
Like the jury system?
The jury system. Secondly, there's strategy to that in the deadlift I didn't even know about until somebody explained it to me. I'm like, that's fucked up. Right. So now you can, you know, pay $50 to, you know. You know, so, but that's strategy though. I mean, you might lose $50, but you know, that brings in a different level of strategy to the deadlift, which there's already strategy there because you can change lift and stuff like that. but just layer something else on there. Like, oh my God, now I need 2 coaches.
You need one to stand at the jury table with a €100 bill, just like ready to throw it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that adds to that. But so those shared ideas, I think, happen more so now than before. And the lifters get along better than they did before. The top lift, you deal with the bottom lifters are cool, right? Because they don't know any better. Yep. The top lifters are fucking cool. Respect everybody across the board. It's the middle fuckers, right? Right? They need humbled, right? They need an injury. They need to go to a meet and get waxed. They need humbled. The top lifters have been humbled enough times. It's like, you know what? This isn't even worth me bitching about. Yeah. It kind of goes that route. Yeah. Are you seeing those same type of things?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think the fact that like you invited me here to this podcast probably speaks to that, right? Like, we're from pretty different worlds, pretty different backgrounds in terms of, how we came up in the sport and even like probably a lot of your lifters here are multiply and conjugate style, training and that kind of stuff. And that's very much not what I do, but we're here together sharing ideas and talking about all this kind of stuff. So I think that's a testament to just how interconnected all of this stuff is, you know what I mean? And I think that maybe even goes back further because coming up as somebody who competed, I did one GPC meet because it was my second meet in Alberta and a bunch of my friends were doing it. So I was like, all right, cool. Yeah. And they threw me in knee wraps and I dumped my third squat off my back. But I just think that the more, you can get people together sharing ideas, like you said, hopefully that just means betterment, right? Is like this federation's getting ideas from that one and that one's getting ideas from that one. And it just,
there's a lot of facts that get ignored and because we all squat, bench, and deadlift, right? There's all, if you compete, there's a total, so those are all the same. There is no best way. Yeah. Right. Yeah. There is not. And look at all the top lifters and they all train differently. So even if it's one type of training system, conjugate, Chico, whatever you want to call it, there's still individuality in each one of the top lifters that makes it actually not that system anymore. Yeah. It's their own. Exactly. So you can't say there's one best system. There's figuring out the system that works best for the lifter and molding them, how they come in doesn't really matter, right? They can come in conjugate, they can come in linear, they can come in block, they can come in, any of these other styles, and they're going to get to a certain point. Doesn't matter. At that point, they got to start figuring some shit out for themselves. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can have, so the way that Mike organizes my training right now is it's all done through this spreadsheet that basically tracks. I don't know how much he's talked about this with you before, a tracker. So it tracks my fatigue markers over periods of time, and then breaks that down into like, okay, are we running hot or cold basically in terms of my ability to recover across these different metrics. And then it'll spit out like, okay, you should do an A workout today, which would be like your comp movements, high priority, heavy stuff, or like a B, C, or D, and those scaled down in specificity and whatever. But there are a lot of times where I see what that's given me for the day, and I'm like, I'm going to do a little more or a little less or a different movement, or I'm going to do my B day today because I'm actually feeling pretty good, and I'll do my D day like down the road or whatever. And I've had conversations with him about it, and it's like I do modify the system. Like I'm not following it to a T. And his response has been like, if you weren't, it probably wouldn't work as well. You know what I mean? Like I know what I need on a given day. I know that this feels like it's not quite enough this day, or I need more, or I need to, organize the work a little differently or whatever. But his, it's his program. And the response he's had is that, if you didn't take it and tweak it, it probably wouldn't work as good. It wouldn't. I call that basically auto regulation. Yeah. But to be able to do that, you have to have enough experience training yourself. Yeah. I also think to do that, you have to have enough experience training yourself with different modalities as well. So, and I think anybody who's, a coach or somebody that wants to master their own physical abilities in the sport need to understand how block training works, how linear work. I mean, if they take the time to learn, here's conjugate, here's block, here's linear, which are distinct different models, but they're not. they're all the same. Yeah. They're all based on the same principles, the same philosophies, the same methodologies. They're just different names. You know, block is conjugated. Linear is basically block, but they're all but if people took the time just to research and study those three things, then they'd be like, these are not that different. So what we're talking about is fatigue management, you know, how much specificity a lifter is going to need for their own needs, you know, and progression. You know, it's kind of fucking simple. You know, then it gets nuanced, you know, because you get to, I hate the word genetic limit, but you get to closer to what that limit is. Now things matter a lot. But where I'm now, because of fucking Sam Sulek and stuff, now what I'm really starting to worry about, are we spending too much time talking about the nuance that the people coming into the sport are getting too fucking confused and they're just not having fun. You know, just lift some heavy threes, lift some heavy fives, kind of lay them out in a way that makes sense. You know, start with some fives, you know, go to some threes and then go to some singles, you know, and lay this shit out and lift big weight, you know, and kind of go that way. Because it really, I mean, for them, it really is that simple.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely easy to get lost in the details and stuff. But I think, like, one thing I think that a good coach is going to do is they're going to be able to facilitate that discussion with a client, right? So let's say your client doesn't know block versus linear versus conjugated or whatever. If you are able to include them in the process of their training, they probably have some intuitions about what might work, what might not work. You know, things they like and dislike can heavily influence their buy-in to the training at the very least. If not the actual outcome of the stimulus and the response to it. So I think a good coach is going to work collaboratively with a lifter, especially if it's an experienced lifter who's been around for a bit. And a lot of the times that's what programming looks like for me, is having a meeting with my client and saying, like, what do you think we should do? You know, and I'm not like having them put together the bones of the program, but more or less I'm helping, you know, they're helping like finishing touches and like helping with, if I'm torn between a couple of movements, or like, I don't know, I want to do 4s or 5s or 6s, like, what's your preference? You know what I mean? Letting them fill in the blanks there and having those conversations can be super impactful. Because sometimes they'll remember shit that maybe isn't in the spreadsheet. You know what I mean? Like, you've got their performance and the numbers tracked for years. But if they remember that in that February in 2019, you know, they were doing leg presses, but they didn't log them and they were doing it on day 3, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they'll have the memory of those things that, you know, helped push things along. And you can really lean on people, as well as make them feel like they're involved, like they're part of it, and like they have agency and like they get a say. And I think a lot of the times, like, maybe not a lot of the times, but I think sometimes that gets missed. And I think that, I don't know. I think there's a certain circumstance where you want to be like, no, this is what I say, this is what we do. And then I think more broadly, it's probably more useful to try to like include the lifter. Sure, because they'll take ownership in it. Yeah. You know, if they're a part of it, they're going to take some ownership in it. And it's also going to separate you from a lot of the other ones that are here just do this, which plays into that. Were there any topics that you wanted to cover that I didn't bring up? Oh boy. No, I think we kind of ran the gamut here. I did want to say that, you know, because I did listen to the Massonomics thing, and that stuffed crust is gross, man. The Pizza Hut stuffed crust pizza. It's gross because it is, like you said, it is like they just put the fucking mozzarella stick in there and it never melts. Yeah. So I had a note there that stuffed crust sucks. It's just like a rubbery ass cheese stick, and you get a couple of them and then you roll them into the crust. What other shitty jobs did you have to do? So I was able to go from making pizzas to delivering pizzas, which I thought was awesome. I had a great time. I'd like pick up my girlfriend, we'd go drive around, and I'd like drop off pizzas. And I don't know, if there was a blizzard, you'd just drive really slow and people would tip really well. Like, it was not the worst job I've ever had. I worked as a janitor for the government. That sucked. In like an office building downtown somewhere. And it took me like an hour and a half to clean the floors I needed to clean. And then I would just like sit in the janitor's closet and read a book or something. And then I started getting in shit for that. So It wasn't a good job. I worked in the meat department at a grocery store. I'd go like hose down all the weird like saws and stuff that they use to chop up all the ribs and meat bits. I would drive around this van loaded with groceries to old folks' high rises, and I would set up these mobile shops at like government subsidized prices to offer people in like the old folks' homes discounted groceries. Worked as a bartender, worked as a body piercer for a number of years, poking holes in people.
What's the most interesting hole that you've poked?
Oh, I've done.
God, that's fucked up.
I've done all of them, pretty much. So, yeah, I don't know. I've had a lot of different jobs.
What is the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Go to calgarybarbell.com. There's a contact form on there that you can reach out to us through. There's applications if you're looking for coaching. We got our app. We got our free 16-week program. Everything's calgarybarbell.com. Or hit us up on Instagram, Calgary Barbell. I'm Bryce_CBB on Instagram. We got YouTube and all that stuff too.
Anything new coming out?
Dylan's like,
always.
Yeah, we got apparel coming out in I think November. We got some more programs coming out on the app right away. The app's probably the biggest thing.
Okay.
Yeah, we put a lot of work and time into it. We got a cool Discord community, and the app works great for tracking and uploading your video to it. And we do like a form check Friday for everybody in there every week. And
so it went from YouTube to the app.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. We try to because I know a lot of people like sell spreadsheets, and that was a big thing, right? They sell a PDF, they sell a spreadsheet, and we hummed and hawed about doing that for years. And the issue for me was I had people who would take the free program we made, and they would run it and be like, I got injured. And then I'd have a conversation with them, and they'd be like, well, I put in the maxes I wanted to hit at the end. And I was like, so like I wanted a way to do something like that, but also be able to have some oversight and be able to like help people change and address like programming concerns or equipment differences from the written program and all that kind of stuff. So we have the app and this Discord community where people can, help or get help with organizing training blocks and fixing their technique and substituting stuff and getting over injuries and working around stuff. And it's all, me and Danny are in there every week coaching. So, we can do like a lower price kind of programming option that comes with coaching. And that's been pretty cool to be able to actually find something that combines that and we can deliver in a meaningful way.
It works. I want to thank you for coming out.
Man, thanks for having me.
Great sitting down.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do some stuff with you tomorrow. So it'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
okay. We're done. We're out.
All right.
Done. You guys are selecting Merrick for your telehealth platform needs. They have a couple different ways that they go about doing this. The first is through a self-selected experience. There's a table talk panel, which is the full panel. That would be the panel that I personally get twice a year. That's checking everything. You name it, it's all there. The other panel is a checkup panel with a guided optimization. You're connected with a patient care coordinator, and the patient care coordinator will meet with you to determine what your needs are. Thing to be able to help optimize your health or mitigate without judgment. So the discount code again is Table Talk Merrick Health for all your hormone optimization and performance needs. So I want to call out the limited edition apparel. The link is in the description. As I've spoken about before, the limited edition apparel is apparel that I basically come up with. So some of the designs suck, some of them not so much. It's a weird thing. The ones that I think are going to do really well usually don't. The ones that I think aren't going to do really well do really well. Either way, they're all limited runs, so it changes, every single month. But all limited edition items are tri-blend material with, the cut that everybody wants now that's a little bit tighter on their arms so they can show off how big their fucking arms are. The limited edition items directly support the podcast. So head over, pick up your shirt today. Could be a hoodie, Could be shorts. We got these ball hugger shorts right now, which I would never wear, but I was told they were super popular. But you know what? They were wrong, because they're still sitting there and I probably should discount them right now. Anyhow, if you want to see the discount on the ball hugger shorts, head over to limited edition apparel, link in the description box.